I ruined your
How
life.
could
No,
you
Mom,
do
you
this to
ruined
me,
mine.
Mom?
My son, Michael,
After
shouted those
everything I've
words
done
across
for
our
this
family dinner
family.
table while my 11-year-old grandson sat frozen beside him. Everyone looked at me, waiting for a defense. I said nothing. Instead, I tightened my grip on the worn envelope hidden inside my purse, the one that contained the truth.
How could you say that in front of the child?
He
needs to hear the truth about what
If
you
Michael
did.
ever
Candace,
opened it,
Stop it,
he
you're
wouldn't
ruining
just
everything.
discover who had protected him all his life. He would lose the father he had spent decades admiring. If this story touches your heart, I'd love for you to stay with me until the end. Please like this video if you've ever sacrificed for someone who never knew it. Subscribe for more heartfelt family stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching, from what time it is there, and whether you've ever been misunderstood by someone you love. Michael Price was born on a rainy Tuesday morning in Columbus, Ohio, with a full head of dark hair and the loudest cry the maternity nurse said she had heard all week. I still remember holding him against my chest, feeling his tiny fingers curl around mine, like he had already decided I belonged to him. I was 26, then tired, in the way only a new mother can be tired, but happy enough to forget my own name. His father, Robert, stood beside the hospital bed, smiling like the whole world had just handed him a prize. "He's going to be something big, Sam," Robert said, brushing one finger over Michael's cheek. "Bigger than both of us." Back then, I believed him. Robert had that kind of voice. Warm, smooth, certain. When he talked, people leaned closer. When he promised something, you wanted to believe it, even when your good sense told you to ask more questions. He was handsome in a clean-cut, all-American way, the kind of man older women at church called charming and younger men called lucky. He ran a small home remodeling business called Price Renovations. Nothing fancy. Mostly kitchens, bathrooms, porch repairs, basement finishing, but Robert talked about it like it was going to become an empire. One day he used to say, "My name will be on trucks all across Ohio." Michael grew up believing every word. To my son, Robert was magic. He was the man who came home with sawdust on his jeans and stories in his pocket. He took Michael to minor league baseball games. He taught him how to hold a fishing rod at Hoover Reservoir. He let him sit in the front seat of his work truck and pretend to read blueprints spread across his lap. I was the mother who packed lunches, checked homework, clipped coupons, and worked night shifts at Riverside Methodist Hospital. That was the part Michael didn't see. Children remember the parent who shows up with fireworks. They don't always remember the parent who keeps the lights on. I was a nurse for more than 35 years. In those early days, I worked the night shift because the pay differential helped cover our mortgage groceries insurance. Michael's shoes, Robert's late invoices, and the credit cards he promised were temporary business tools. I would leave for work at 6:30 in the evening, kiss Michael on the forehead, and come home just after sunrise with sore feet and eyes that burned from fluorescent lights. Sometimes I found Robert asleep on the couch with the television still on and unpaid bills sitting under the mail. But when Michael woke up, he never saw that. He saw his father making pancakes in the kitchen, laughing too loudly, calling him champ. "Your mother worries too much," Robert would say when Michael asked why I looked tired. And Michael believed that too. At first, I thought it was harmless. A father wanted to be admired by his son. A boy needed heroes. I told myself not to be bitter. I told myself love was not a competition, but little comments have roots. By the time Michael was 12, he had started repeating things he must have heard from Robert. "Dad says, you don't understand business. Dad says, you think too small. Dad says, if he had more support, the company would be bigger." Each sentence landed softly at first like a paper cut. Small enough to ignore, sharp enough to remember. I never wanted to turn Michael against his father, so I swallowed the truth. I smiled when I wanted to scream. I said, "Your dad works hard," even when I had just paid a supplier from my nursing paycheck, because Robert had spent the deposit from one job to patch the disaster from another. Robert was not always cruel. That is what makes a story like this difficult to tell. He could be tender when he wanted to be. He brought me coffee after long shifts. He danced with me in the kitchen when old Motown songs played on the radio. He cried the day Michael graduated from high school. But he was also reckless, proud, addicted to the feeling of being seen as successful. And the more his business struggled, the more he needed someone to blame. That someone became me. Not directly at first, never in front of outsiders. Robert was too careful for that. But inside our house, his disappointment had a direction. If Samantha would stop panicking every time I take a risk, we'd be somewhere by now. If your mother understood opportunity, this family wouldn't still be living paycheck to paycheck. If I had married a woman with vision, Michael would have built something you could inherit. I heard those words from the hallway once when Michael was 17. I stood there in my nurse's shoes, still wearing my hospital badge, holding a bag of groceries in one hand and Michael's dry-cleaned graduation suit in the other. I remember looking down at that suit and thinking, he has no idea who paid for this. But I said nothing. That became the pattern of my life. Robert spoke beautifully. I paid quietly. Michael adored the beautiful speaker. And I became the quiet obstacle. After high school, Michael didn't want college. He wanted to work with his father. Robert encouraged it immediately. "He's got my eye," Robert said. "He understands houses. He understands people. College would only slow him down." I disagreed. Not because I didn't believe in Michael. I believed in him more than anyone. I just wanted him to have choices. I wanted him to learn accounting contracts, business law, something solid beneath his dreams. I had seen too many men in work boots lose everything because they trusted handshakes and charm. But Michael heard only one thing. "You don't think I can do it?" "That's not what I said," I told him. "It's what you mean." He was 19 then, standing in our kitchen with his jaw clenched like Robert's wearing his father's old company jacket. I remember the pride in his face and the anger beneath it. "Dad says some people build," he told me, "and some people just stand in the way." I wanted to tell him everything right then. I wanted to tell him about the checks that bounced the customers, who called crying the suppliers, threatening liens, the tax letters Robert hid in the garage beneath paint-stained tarps. But how do you tell a son that his hero has cracks? How do you take a father away from a boy who still needs one? So I chose the softer sentence. "Michael, I just want you to be careful." He laughed at me. Careful became a dirty word in our house. To Robert, careful meant fearful. To Michael, careful meant unsupportive. To me, careful meant knowing exactly how fast a dream could become a debt. For a while, Michael worked beside Robert and seemed happy. He learned how to measure cabinets, patch drywall, talk to clients, charm older homeowners into trusting him. He was good with his hands. Better than Robert, honestly. Michael had patience for the work itself. He could sand a piece of wood until it looked loved. But he also inherited Robert's hunger for approval. Every compliment made him stand taller. Every criticism wounded him deeply. Every delay felt like disrespect. Every unpaid invoice felt like betrayal. And every warning from me sounded like doubt. When Michael was 22, Robert brought home a folder one evening and placed it on the kitchen table. I remember it because I had just finished making meatloaf, and Michael was still in his work boots grinning like a boy invited into a secret club. "We're expanding," Robert announced. I looked at the folder. Michael looked at his father. "Your name may need to go on some papers," Robert said casually. "Just formal stuff. Shows continuity. Family business." Something cold moved through me. "What papers?" I asked. Robert's smile tightened. "Sam, don't start. I'm asking what papers." Michael rolled his eyes. "Mom, please. Dad knows what he's doing." There it was again. Dad knows. Mom worries. I wanted to grab that folder and read every page. I wanted to pull Michael aside and tell him not to sign anything without a lawyer. But Robert was already watching me, warning me with his eyes not to embarrass him in front of our son. And Michael was watching too, waiting for me to prove I was the problem. So I said only, "Just read before you sign." Michael shook his head. "You make everything feel dangerous." No, I thought. Some things are dangerous before anyone admits it. But that night, I stayed quiet again. For years afterward, I would wonder if that was the moment everything could have changed. If I had screamed. If I had taken the folder. If I had told Michael the truth about his father before the truth became a weapon. But mothers make choices with the information and courage they have at the time. And sometimes, love chooses silence because it believes silence will protect the child. I did not know then that my silence would one day become the very thing Michael used against me. By the time Robert's business began to truly collapse, Michael had already built his memories in stone. His father was the dreamer. I was the doubter. His father was the builder. I was the break. His father believed in him. I was afraid of him becoming too much like the man I had married. And maybe that last part was true. I was afraid. Not of Michael's talent, not of his ambition. I was afraid because I had seen the road Robert walked. I had seen how charm could cover debt, how pride could bury truth, how a man could smile at church on Sunday while hiding final notices in his glove compartment. I feared that if Michael followed him blindly, he would not just inherit a business, he would inherit a disaster. But Michael never saw my fear as love. He saw it as betrayal. And that was how the first wall went up between my son and me. Not in one explosive fight, not in one unforgivable sentence, but brick by brick, year by year, built out of misunderstandings, half-truths, and one father's need to remain a hero. I thought I was protecting Michael by letting him keep that hero. I had no idea how much it would cost us both. Michael married Emily in early May on a bright Saturday afternoon when the dogwoods were blooming all across Columbus and the whole city seemed to smell like rain and fresh grass. I remember standing in the church vestibule pinning a boutonniere onto his jacket while he kept glancing toward the sanctuary doors. Nervous, I asked. He smiled, but it was Robert's smile. Confident on the surface, restless underneath. "No," he said. "Just ready." That was Michael's favorite word back then. Ready. Ready to be a husband. Ready to be a father someday. Ready to start his own business. Ready to prove he was not just Robert Price's son, but a man who could build something bigger. Emily was beautiful, polished, and sure of herself. She worked as a leasing manager for a real estate company, and she understood appearances better than most people understood truth. She knew how to speak softly while still making a person feel small. She wore pearls to Sunday brunch and talked about financial growth like love itself was a business plan. At first, I tried to like her. I told myself every mother struggles a little when her only son marries. I told myself the tightness in my chest was normal. I told myself Emily's coolness toward me was just nerves, just adjustment, just a young woman trying to find her place. But from the beginning, Emily looked at me like I was a locked door standing between her and the life she believed Michael deserved. A few months after the wedding, Michael came over alone. I knew something was coming the moment I opened the front door. He was wearing a navy blazer, though it was only a Tuesday evening, and he had a leather folder tucked under one arm. His hair was combed carefully, his shoes polished. He looked like a salesman trying to impress a banker. "Mom," he said, kissing my cheek quickly. "Do you have coffee?" I made a pot. My hands moved automatically filter grounds, water switch. I had served coffee to doctors at 3 a.m., grieving families in hospital waiting rooms, neighbors after funerals. But that night, While the machine hissed and sputtered, I felt the old warning inside me wake up. Michael sat at my kitchen table and opened the folder. I'm starting my own company. I looked at the papers before I looked at him. Home remodeling. Residential renovation and investment restoration, he corrected, as if the longer phrase made it safer. Kitchens, bathrooms, flips, rental upgrades. Emily has contacts through her office. She knows investors. I know the work. It's perfect. I sat down across from him. What does Robert think? His face changed for half a second. Just enough. Dad would have loved it. Robert had been gone 3 years by then. Cancer took him fast, though not before he left behind enough half-truths to haunt the living. Michael still spoke of him like a saint who had been robbed of greatness. I nodded carefully. What do you need from me? Michael smiled, relieved, as if he had expected me to understand at last. Not much, just a temporary guarantee. My stomach tightened. What kind of guarantee? He slid a page toward me. The bank wants stronger collateral. If you let me use the house as security just for the first operating line, I can get approved. I already have 3 jobs lined up. I stared at the paper. My house. The little brick ranch on the east side of Columbus that I had fought to keep through Robert's bad debts, through double shifts, through winters, when I kept the thermostat low and wore 2 sweaters indoors. The house where Michael took his first steps. The house I had nearly lost more than once because of men who believed confidence could replace math. No, I said. The word came out quietly. Michael blinked. You didn't even read it. I don't need to. His smile disappeared. Mom, this is exactly what I'm talking about. What are you talking about? You never even give me a chance. I folded my hands on the table to keep them from shaking. Michael using a home as collateral for a new business is serious. If something goes wrong, something always goes wrong in your mind. That isn't fair. No, what isn't fair is having a mother who acts like every dream is a threat. I took a breath. I believe in your ability. I don't believe in risking the roof over my head for a business that hasn't proven itself yet. His jaw tightened. My father would have helped me. There it was, the ghost sitting at the table between us. I looked at my son, and for one terrible second I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because pain sometimes comes so sharply, the body reaches for the wrong response. Robert would have helped him. Robert, who had used every available dollar before the bills came due. Robert, who had signed contracts he couldn't fulfill. Robert, who had left me sorting through notices and phone calls while Michael grieved a version of him that had never fully existed. But I said none of that. I only said, your father took risks he couldn't afford. Michael stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor. You always do that. Do what? Talk about him like he was some reckless fool. He built something. He left debts, Michael. His face hardened. He left a name. You're the one who buried it. The room went still. I remember hearing the coffee maker click off behind me. Such a small sound, but I can still hear it now. Michael gathered his papers. I knew you'd say no. Then why did you come? Because I thought maybe for once you'd choose me over your fear. He walked out before I could answer. 2 days later, Emily called. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't pretend kindness. Samantha, she said, I just want to understand. So she said, I just want to understand, so me thing. All right, do you actually want Michael to succeed? I closed my eyes. Emily, this is not about wanting him to fail. Then why would you refuse the one thing that could get him started, me thing? All right. Do you actually want Michael to succeed? I closed my eyes. Emily, this is not about wanting him to fail. Then why would you refuse the one thing that could get him started? Because if the company fails, I could lose my home. She gave a soft laugh. Not loud, not rude enough to accuse, just enough to sting. Most mothers would risk anything for their children. I held the phone tighter. Some mothers have already risked more than anyone knows. There was a pause. What does that mean? It means I'm not discussing this with you. Most mothers would risk anything for their children. I held the phone tighter. Some mothers have already risked more than anyone knows. There was a pause. What does that mean? It means I'm not discussing this with you. She hung up without saying goodbye. Michael started the company anyway. Price Home Renewal. He used credit cards, a small personal loan, and money Emily convinced her parents to provide. For 8 months, he worked like a man trying to outrun doubt. At first, things looked promising. He sent me pictures of a kitchen remodel in Worthington, a bathroom in Grove City, a porch repair near Bexley. Or rather, he sent them to a family group chat. Not directly to me. Never directly. But I saw them, and I studied every detail. His tile lines were clean. His cabinet work was beautiful. He had talent, real talent. I wanted him to win. That was what made the next part hurt so badly. The trouble began with a subcontractor named Dale Henson. Michael hired him for plumbing and electrical work on 2 jobs because Dale offered a cheaper rate and promised fast turnaround. I warned Michael once gently to check licenses and insurance. He snapped, "Mom, I know what I'm doing." So I stepped back. Dale disappeared halfway through both projects after taking advance payments. One homeowner threatened to sue. Another posted an angry review online with pictures of exposed pipes and unfinished walls. Materials costs rose. Emily's investor contacts stopped answering calls. Michael tried to fix everything himself, working 16-hour days until exhaustion made him careless. By December, the business was sinking. I found out how bad it was from a woman named Mrs. Whitaker, one of Michael's clients. She called my house because Robert's old business number had once been connected to our address, and somehow she found me. "Are you related to Michael Price?" she asked, voice trembling. "I'm his mother." There was silence. Then she began to cry. She and her husband were in their 70s. They had paid Michael a deposit for a bathroom renovation because she needed a safer shower after hip surgery. The job was unfinished. Michael had stopped returning calls because I later learned he was ashamed and overwhelmed. I wrote her a check from my emergency savings. Not the full amount. I didn't have that, but enough to hire someone to make the bathroom usable. Enough to keep her from calling an attorney that week. "Please don't tell Michael," I said. She sounded confused. "Why not?" "Because he will hate me for helping him," I thought. Instead, I said he's under a lot of pressure. After that, I paid a supplier bill, then a small lien release, then a late insurance premium he didn't know was about to lapse. Each payment felt like placing my hand under a falling beam, while my son stood above me, yelling that I had caused the collapse. In February, Price Home Renewal closed. Michael came to my house 3 weeks later, thinner, angrier, with shadows under his eyes. "You were right," he said from the doorway. There was no gratitude in his voice, only accusation. "I didn't want to be right." "Yes, you did." His laugh was bitter. "You probably watched the whole thing happen and felt satisfied." "Michael, how can you say that to me? Because if you had helped me from the beginning, I wouldn't have been desperate enough to hire cheap help. I wouldn't have been underfunded. I wouldn't have failed." I looked at my son and saw Robert's pride sitting on his shoulders like a heavy coat. "You made business decisions," I said softly. "Those decisions had consequences." His eyes flashed. "And you made sure I faced them alone." That was the moment I understood something that broke my heart in a new way. Michael did not just blame me for refusing him. He needed to blame me. Because if his failure belonged to me, then he did not have to look at the contracts. He hadn't read closely enough, the subcontractor. He hadn't checked the money he had spent too quickly, or the father whose shadow he kept chasing. He could stay wounded instead of becoming responsible. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table with my checkbook open and cried until my chest hurt. Not because of the money. Money could be earned again. Slowly, painfully, but it could be earned. I cried because I had saved him from the first lawsuit, softened the first fall, protected the first piece of his name, and he would never know. Worse than that, he believed I had pushed him. That was the first business Michael lost, but it was not the last. And it was only the beginning of the story. He would spend years telling himself the story where his mother stood at the center of every failure, blocking every door, stealing every chance. He had no idea that behind those same doors, I was still holding back storms he couldn't even see. After Michael's first company closed, something in him hardened toward me. It was not the loud kind of anger at first. Loud anger can sometimes burn itself out. What came from Michael was colder than that. He stopped calling on Sundays. He answered my texts with 1 or 2 words. When I asked if he and Emily wanted to come over for dinner, he said they were busy. When I asked if I could stop by, he said it was not a good time. It was never a good time. Emily became the voice between us. If I called Michael's phone and he didn't answer, Emily would text back from his number. He's resting. He's working. He's under a lot of stress. Then one afternoon, the message came from Emily's own phone. Samantha Michael needs space. Please respect that. I stared at those words while sitting in my car outside the grocery store, a bag of melting frozen peas on the passenger seat. I had raised him through fever school projects, heartbreak, and grief. I had held his hand when Robert died. I had paid debts he did not know existed. And now I was being told to respect my distance like I was a stranger knocking too often. But I did respect it. That is what mothers often do when they are afraid of losing the little access they have left. We accept smaller pieces of our children and pretend we are grateful for crumbs. Then Ethan was born. For a while, that baby softened everything. Michael called me from the hospital in the middle of the night, his voice shaking with wonder. "Mom," he whispered, "he's here." I drove through dark, empty streets with tears in my eyes. When I reached the maternity floor, Michael was standing outside Emily's room, wearing that stunned expression new fathers wear when life has just become larger than their pride. "He's so small," Michael said. I touched his arm. "You were smaller." For 1 second, he looked like my boy again. Then Emily's mother came out of the room and said, "They're ready for family now." Family. I remember noticing the word. I remember wondering whether I was still included in it. Ethan had Michael's eyes and Emily's chin, but when I held him, he curled his tiny hand around my finger, the same way Michael had done 42 years earlier. Something inside me broke open and healed at the same time. "My sweet boy," I whispered. "Grandma's here." Emily corrected me gently. "We were thinking Nana, actually. Grandma sounds a little old." I smiled because there are moments when keeping peace matters more than winning a word. "Nana is fine," I said. For the first 2 years of Ethan's life, I was allowed in carefully measured doses. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, occasional Saturday visits when Emily needed help. I learned to ask permission for everything. Could I bring soup? Could I buy him winter boots? Could I take him to the park? Could I come to his preschool program? Sometimes Emily said yes. Sometimes she said, "We'll let you know," which usually meant no. Michael rarely made the decisions aloud. He let Emily manage the gate, and I pretended not to notice. But Ethan loved me easily. Children can sense who looks at them without wanting anything back. He would run into my arms shouting Nana Sam and press his sticky face against my sweater. He loved the oatmeal cookies I baked with extra cinnamon. He loved the little wooden train set I kept in the living room. He loved sitting beside me while I told him stories about brave rabbits, lost puppies, and old houses that remembered every family who had ever lived inside them. One Sunday afternoon, when Ethan was 4, he looked up from his coloring book and asked, "Why doesn't Daddy smile at you?" The crayon in my hand stopped moving. "He smiles sometimes." "No, not like he smiles at other people." I swallowed. "Your daddy has worries." Ethan nodded with the seriousness only a child can have. "Mommy says you made Daddy sad." I looked toward the kitchen where Emily was rinsing glasses with her back to us. "What else does Mommy say?" Ethan shrugged. "She says Daddy could have been rich if people believed in him. There are pains that do not make you cry immediately because the body needs time to understand the wound." I kissed Ethan's hair and said, "Your daddy is a good man who is still learning how to carry disappointment." That was the kindest truth I could give him. The older Ethan grew, the more Emily controlled what he heard about me. She never shouted. She never openly insulted me in front of him. Emily was too polished for that. She used softer weapons. Nana worries too much. Nana doesn't understand business. Nana likes things small. Nana and Daddy have history. History. As if love were just a file cabinet full of old arguments. Michael did not stop her. That was what hurt most. A husband can be influenced by his wife, yes. A grown son can be tired, embarrassed, defensive. But Michael knew enough of my heart to know I loved him. He knew I had never missed a birthday, never refused him a meal, never turned away when he was sick, or grieving, or afraid. Still, when Emily built the wall, he handed her bricks. I kept helping anyway, not loudly, never in a way that would embarrass him. When Ethan's preschool sent a notice about unpaid activity fees, I called the office and paid them over the phone. "Would you like us to send a receipt to the parents?" the secretary asked. "No," I said, "just mark it anonymous." When Michael's truck broke down and he told me he had it handled, I knew he did not. I knew because the repair shop owner, Mr. Alvarez, went to my church and mentioned casually that Michael had asked for 2 more weeks to pay. I drove there the next morning and paid the balance. "Should I tell him?" Mr. Alvarez asked. "Please don't." He looked at me for a long moment. "You sure?" "No," I said honestly. "But do it anyway." When Emily complained online about the cost of Ethan's summer reading camp, I mailed the school a cashier's check. When Michael had dental work delayed because his insurance had lapsed between jobs, I called the billing office and paid enough to keep the account from collections. When Christmas came and I noticed Ethan's coat sleeves were too short, I bought a new one and said I found it on clearance. Emily accepted what benefited her and resented the hand that offered it. Michael accepted nothing from me directly. That was the rule. If he knew help came from me, it became control. If he didn't know it, became luck timing or his own ability to manage. So I became invisible. I became the quiet payment, the unsigned envelope, the anonymous account credit, the grocery card tucked into a birthday book for Ethan, just for fun. And while I was doing all that, Michael was telling people I had abandoned him. At a 4th of July cookout at Emily's parents' house, I heard him say it. I had stepped inside to get more napkins. The kitchen window was open and voices drifted in from the deck. "My mother had every chance to help me get on my feet," Michael said. "She chose to watch me fail." A man asked, "Really?" Michael gave a bitter laugh. "That's Samantha. She likes being needed, but only if you stay beneath her." I stood there holding a stack of red paper napkins, unable to move. Emily's voice followed. "She's very good at playing sweet, but Michael knows the truth." The truth. I almost walked outside. I almost placed every receipt, every check, every quiet sacrifice on that picnic table beside the ketchup and paper plates. But then Ethan ran into the kitchen, face sticky with watermelon. "Nana Sam." Come see my sparkler." And I looked at his little face, so bright, so innocent, still untouched by the full ugliness of adult resentment. I followed him outside. I smiled. I watched the sparkler burn gold in his small hand, while my own heart burned silently inside my chest. That night, after I came home, I sat on the edge of my bed and opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand. Inside was a folder labeled only with Michael's name. I had started keeping records years before, not because I planned to use them against him, but because a nurse learns to document what others deny. Receipts, bank copies, letters, payment confirmations, notes from Richard Bennett, old statements from Linda Carter. Proof of love, if love ever had to defend itself. I touched the folder, then closed the drawer. Not yet, I told myself. A mother should not have to prove she loves her child. But deep down, I was beginning to understand something that frightened me. One day, proof might be all I had left. Michael's second big chance came 3 years after Price home renewal closed. By then, Ethan was in first grade. I had retired from full-time nursing, and Michael had spent enough time working odd contracting jobs to convince himself that the first failure had been a temporary wound, not a warning. He had patched roofs, installed cabinets, repaired rental units for small landlords, and done handyman work for people who paid cash and wanted no questions. He was good at the work. That was never the problem. The problem was the story he carried in his head. To Michael, every setback had a villain, and somehow, no matter how far I stood from his decisions, that villain always had my face. He called me one evening in March, which surprised me so much, I nearly dropped the mug I was washing. "Mom," he said, "I need to talk." Those words still had power over me. A mother can be bruised for years and still respond to need like instinct. "Of course," I said. "Do you want to come over?" "No. Just listen." I turned off the kitchen faucet. "I'm listening. There's a property in Reynoldsburg, old duplex. Needs work, but the numbers are unbelievable. If I renovate it, I can rent both sides or sell it for a major profit." I closed my eyes. "Michael, don't start. I'm not asking for money." That sentence should have relieved me. Instead, it made me more afraid. "What are you asking? I need you to confirm something." "All right. Did you ever have any financial judgment filed under the Price name after Dad died?" My hand tightened around the dish towel. "What, anything tied to his company? Lawsuit settlements, liens, anything like that?" The kitchen seemed to shrink around me. "Why are you asking me this?" "Because the bank hesitated." "Hesitated how?" "They said there were old complications connected to Price renovations. Nothing active, but enough to make them cautious. They asked if I had full documentation that the matters were resolved." My heart began to pound. "What did you tell them?" "I told them my mother handled all of Dad's affairs and probably made a mess of it." I stood very still. He said it so easily, not cruelly, not shouting, not even with the effort of anger, just as if it were common knowledge. "My mother made a mess. Michael," I said carefully, "those matters were resolved. Then why does my name keep hitting walls?" "Your name?" "Yes, my name. Every time I try to do something real, something with scale, something Dad would have done, there's some old shadow behind me. And it always leads back to you." "That isn't true." "Then explain it." I opened my mouth. For the first time in years, the truth rose so close I could taste it. I wanted to tell him that the old complications existed because Robert Price and Victor Hayes had built a trap out of charm, borrowed money, and paperwork Michael had been too young to understand. I wanted to tell him that the only reason those shadows were resolved was because I had paid them down with my body, my retirement, my sleep, and every soft part of my future. But I also heard Richard Bennett's voice in my memory. "Samantha, if you tell him without the full record in front of you, Robert becomes a ghost. he can defend, and you become the living person he can attack. Richard had said that years ago, sitting in his office downtown with a legal pad between us and pity in his eyes. Keep the documents. Keep everything. One day, if it must come out, it has to come out clean. Not as an argument, as proof. So I swallowed the truth again. I can help you gather documents, I said. Michael laughed. You can help. Now you can help? I said documents. I don't need you managing me. I'm not trying to manage you. Then stop standing in the doorway of my life. There are sentences children say that become permanent furniture in a mother's memory. That one stayed. Stop standing in the doorway of my life. I had spent years holding doors open behind him. He only saw me blocking the one he wanted to run through. 2 weeks later, I learned from Linda Carter that the bank had declined his loan. Linda had been the accountant for Robert's company years before, and after everything collapsed, she helped sort through what remained. We had not spoken often since those days. Some people stay tied to you by disasters, not friendship. Still, once a year, she called to ask if I was all right, and once a year, I lied and told her I was. That April, her voice sounded strained. Samantha, she said, has Michael been asking about old business records? I sat down on the edge of my bed. Yes, he came by my office. I felt the blood drain from my face. What did he ask? Whether you mishandled Robert's estate, whether unpaid obligations after Robert's death damaged his ability to get financing. I pressed my fingers to my forehead. What did you say? I told him the truth. I could safely tell that you resolved more than anyone had a right to expect, and he didn't want to hear it. Of course he didn't. Truth is useless to someone still in love with his own injury. He said Robert told him before he died that you panicked, shut things down, and cost the family everything. Linda said quietly. I closed my eyes. Robert's final cruelty had not been the debts. It had been the story. Cancer had taken his strength, his hair, his appetite, his voice some days, but not his pride. Even near the end, lying in a hospital bed with tubes in his arms, he had found a way to preserve himself inside Michael's heart. Your mother never believed in me. Your mother let fear ruin the company. Your mother doesn't understand men who build. I was there for some of those conversations. I heard pieces from the hallway. I saw Michael come out of Robert's room with wet eyes and a hardened jaw. I should have corrected it then. Maybe that is the sin I still carry. Not that I lied, but that I allowed a lie to stand because the man telling it was dying. When Michael's loan was denied, his anger became public. He didn't call me first. He posted on Facebook. Some people spend your whole life telling you to be careful, then act surprised when you never get anywhere. Not everyone who says they love you wants to see you rise. He did not use my name. He didn't have to, Emily commented with a red heart. Proud of you for speaking your truth. Speaking your truth. Those words have covered more cruelty than any phrase in modern life. By evening, my phone had buzzed with messages from cousins' church acquaintances and people I had not heard from in years. Is everything okay with Michael saw his post? Hope you two work it out. Children don't usually say things like that unless they're hurting. That last one came from Robert's sister Diane, who had never once asked how I managed after her brother died, but always had energy to defend his memory. I did not reply to any of them. The next Sunday, Michael came to my house without warning. I opened the door and found him standing on the porch with a folder in his hand and fury in his eyes. Tell me what you did, he said. I looked past him toward the street. Emily was sitting in the passenger seat of their SUV, arms crossed, watching. Come inside. No. Say it right here. Michael, I will not discuss private matters on the porch. He stepped closer. Private? You mean like whatever you did to Dad's company? Like whatever you buried that keeps coming back on me? Come inside. No. Say it right here. Michael, I will not discuss private matters on the porch. He stepped closer. Private? You mean like whatever you did to Dad's company? Like whatever you buried that keeps coming back on me? You don't understand what happened. Because you won't tell me. His voice cracked on that last word, and for one moment, beneath the anger, I saw the boy who had lost his father and built a shrine out of incomplete memories. I softened. Come inside, I said again. Please. He hesitated. Then Emily got out of the SUV. Michael, she called, don't let her twist this. The softness vanished from his face. I looked at Emily, then back at my son. I have never tried to hurt you, I said. He laughed bitterly. You don't have to try, Mom. You just do. I felt something inside me weaken. He opened the folder and pulled out a copy of the bank's denial letter. Old unresolved risk patterns associated with prior family business activity, he read aloud. That's what they called it. Prior family business activity. That means Dad. That means you. No, I whispered. It means things were more complicated than you know. Then uncomplicate them. I almost did. God help me, I almost did. I saw the whole future split in front of me. In one version, I told him everything right there on the porch while Emily listened, and Robert's ghost finally lost its clean white suit. In another version, I kept my promise to Richard and waited until I had the documents laid out in a way Michael could not run from. I chose the second version, not because it was easier, because the first would have become a screaming match, and Michael would have left believing I had finally insulted his dead father to save myself. Not like this, I said. His face hardened completely. Then I was right. He folded the letter and shoved it back into the folder. Dad warned me about you. Those 5 words did more damage than all the others. Dad warned me about you. I held the doorframe because my knees felt weak. Michael walked back to the SUV. Emily watched me through the windshield as they pulled away. Her expression calm, almost satisfied. That night, Richard Bennett called. His voice was older than I remembered, thinner, but still precise. Linda told me Michael is digging. Yes, I said. You need to be careful. I'm tired of being careful, Richard. I know. He hates me. There was a long pause. No, Samantha. He hates the story he was given. Unfortunately, right now, he thinks that story is you. I sat in the dark living room, the phone pressed to my ear, looking at the family photo on the mantel. Michael at 16 between Robert and me, smiling with both arms around us, unaware that one parent was already teaching him who to blame, and the other was already preparing to pay for what he did not know. How long am I supposed to carry this? I asked. Richard sighed. Until carrying it becomes more dangerous than revealing it. I did not know then how close that day already was. Linda Carter called me on a Thursday morning in late September. I remember the exact moment because I had just come in from watering the mums on my front porch. The air had turned crisp overnight, and for the first time that season, I could smell fall in Ohio, that dry, leafy smell that always made me think of school buses, football games, and apple pies cooling on kitchen counters. Her name appeared on my phone, and something inside me tightened before I even answered. Linda did not call casually. Samantha, she said, and her voice was low. Are you alone? I looked around my quiet kitchen. Yes. Sit down. I did. There are people who say those words dramatically. Linda was not one of them. She had been an accountant for more than 40 years, the kind of woman who wore gray cardigans, sensible shoes, and read bank statements the way other people read novels. She did not waste emotion. If Linda told you to sit down, it meant the floor might soon become useful. What happened? I asked. I need to ask you something first. Has Michael mentioned a man named Victor Hayes? The room seemed to tilt. For a few seconds, I could not breathe. I had not heard that name spoken aloud in years. Not in conversation, not in church, not in family gossip. Victor Hayes belonged to a locked room in my memory, one I entered only when sleep betrayed me. Tall, silver-tongued, expensive watch, cold blue eyes. The kind of man who could shake an elderly widow's hand, compliment her garden, and walk away with her deposit check, knowing he would never finish the work. Samantha, Linda said. I pressed my palm against the table. Yes, I whispered. Why? Linda exhaled. Because Michael is about to do business with him. For one heartbeat, I was 20 years younger, standing in a courthouse hallway, with my hands shaking around a paper cup of coffee while Richard Bennett told me what could happen if the wrong documents surfaced. What kind of business, I asked. Victor has reappeared under a new company name, Hayes Property Solutions. Private lending, distressed properties, renovation partnerships. He's been circling small contractors who need capital. Michael. Yes. I closed my eyes. Of course. Of course Victor would find the wound. Men like him always did. They did not enter through locked doors. They entered through resentment, pride, hunger, and the desperate need to prove someone wrong. How do you know? I asked. One of my current clients is a title officer. She saw Michael's name connected to a preliminary packet for property acquisition. Victor's name was on the funding agreement. Does Michael know who Victor is? No. My laugh came out broken. He thinks he knows everything. Victor knows he doesn't. That sentence chilled me more than anything else. I stood and walked to the kitchen window. Across the street, my neighbor's maple tree had started to turn red at the tips. Such a beautiful, ordinary thing, while the past reached up through the floorboards of my life. Linda, I said, tell me exactly what you saw. I don't have the full packet, but from what my client described, Victor is offering Michael short-term capital for a renovation project. High interest, personal guarantee, penalties if the work isn't completed on schedule, and there may be language that gives Victor control if Michael defaults. That's how he did it before. I know. My fingers curled against the window ledge. Before. That word held too much. Before Robert got sick. Before Michael understood signatures. Before I sold pieces of my future to keep my son from being dragged into court. Before Robert turned himself into a martyr and left me holding the truth like a loaded gun, I was too afraid to fire. Why now? I asked. Linda was quiet. Then she said, because Victor must know Michael has spent years blaming you. That makes him easy to approach. I closed my eyes. An enemy does not always need to lie. Sometimes he only needs to agree with the lie your family already believes. I could imagine it too clearly. Victor sitting across from Michael in some polished office or restaurant booth, speaking in that smooth voice of his. Your father was a visionary. Your mother never understood him. You were robbed of your legacy. Let me help you reclaim it. My son would have swallowed every word like medicine. What do we do? I asked. Linda repeated softly. You called me Linda. I called because you had a right to know. But Samantha, you need to understand something. If you go to Michael without proof, hell, think you're interfering again. Linda repeated softly. You called me Linda. I called because you had a right to know. But Samantha, you need to understand something. If you go to Michael without proof, he'll think you're interfering again. I have proof. Do you have it organized? I looked toward the hallway toward the bedroom where my drawer held the folder marked with Michael's name. Some of it. That may not be enough. It has to be enough. No, Linda said firmly. Not with Victor. Not with Michael in this state of mind. If you accuse Victor, he'll deny it. If you accuse Robert, Michael will defend him. If you say you paid settlements, Michael will ask why you never told him. Every answer will create another wound unless the record is complete. I sank back into the chair. I don't have time for complete. Then call Richard. Call. At the mention of Richard Bennett, an old exhaustion moved through me. Richard had been our lawyer when everything fell apart, though our was never the right word. He had represented me when I realized my husband's charm had left legal wreckage behind. He had protected Michael as much as he could without Michael ever knowing there was danger to protect him from. Richard is retired, I said. Retired lawyers still own telephones. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Linda continued. Victor's return changes things. How much danger is Michael in? If he signs what I think he's signing, financial danger immediately. Legal danger eventually, depending on how Victor structures it and whether old patterns repeat. Old patterns, I whispered. Samantha. I know. But knowing was not the same as being ready. After I hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a long time without moving. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and stopped. I thought of Michael as a little boy running across the backyard with a plastic hammer in his hand shouting, "I'm building like Daddy!" I thought of Robert smiling at him with pride. I thought of myself standing on the porch wanting to call him back inside, where it was safe, knowing even then that children do not want safety when admiration is waiting outside. That afternoon, I called Richard Bennett. His voice sounded older than it had the last time we spoke, but when I said Victor Hayes' name, the years fell away. Is Michael involved? He asked immediately. Yes. How far? He asked. Possibly close to signing. Richard cursed under his breath. I had known the man for decades and had heard him curse only twice. Both times involved Victor Hayes. I was afraid of this, he said. You thought he'd come back? I thought men like Victor never truly leave. They wait until the people who remember them grow tired, die, or get dismissed as bitter old women. I closed my eyes. Michael already dismisses me. I know, that hurt in a different way. Not because Richard meant it cruelly, but because it was true enough that no kindness could soften it. What do? I asked. You warn him not to sign anything. He won't listen. You still warn him. And if he asks why Richard paused, tell him Victor cannot be trusted. He'll ask how I know. Then tell him you know because Victor helped destroy his father's business. And when he says, I destroyed it? Another silence. Then Richard said, then it may be time to gather the records. My hand tightened around the phone. You always told me not to tell him unless we had to. We may have reached unless we have to. Those words stayed with me after the call ended. I went to my bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand. The folder was still there, thick now, swollen with years of secrets. I carried it to the bed and opened it slowly. Receipts, letters, copies of cashier's checks, settlement agreements with names blacked out by Richard years ago. A note in Robert's handwriting that still made my stomach twist. And one faded copy of a document with Michael's young signature at the bottom. He had been 22, old enough to sign. Too young to understand who had placed the pen in his hand. I touched his signature with my fingertip and felt tears rise. My sweet boy, I whispered into the empty room. What did they do to you? But even that was not the whole truth. Because Michael was not only a victim anymore, he was a grown man, a husband, a father, a man who had chosen again and again to turn his pain into accusation. He had wounded me with words he never took back. He had let Emily build distance between me and Ethan. He had allowed Robert's ghost to matter more than his living mother. Still, when danger came, every hurt in me stepped aside. That is the terrible, beautiful burden of motherhood. You can be bleeding from the last blow and still reach out to stop the next one from landing on your child. The following evening, I drove to Michael's house. It was a 2-story beige home in a newer subdivision outside Westerville, the kind with young trees matching mailboxes and porches too small for real sitting. Emily's SUV was in the driveway. Michael's truck was parked at the curb loaded with tools. I sat in my car for a moment, both hands on the steering wheel. Then I saw Ethan through the front window sitting at the dining table doing homework. He looked up, saw my car, and smiled. That smile gave me courage. I walked to the door and rang the bell. Emily answered. Her expression cooled the moment she saw me. Samantha, we weren't expecting you. I need to speak with Michael. He's busy. It's important. She crossed her arms. It always is with you. Before I could answer, Michael appeared behind her. What's going on? I looked past Emily directly at my son. Do not sign anything with Victor Hayes. His face changed. Not with fear, with anger. Emily turned slowly toward him. Victor, she asked. The investor. Michael stepped onto the porch and pulled the door partly closed behind him. How do you know about that? Because people who remember him are trying to keep you from making the worst mistake of your life. He laughed once, sharp and humorless. There it is. Michael, listen to me. No, you listen. Victor knew Dad. He respected Dad. He said Dad was ahead of his time. My stomach turned. Victor used your father. Michael's eyes narrowed. You don't get to rewrite history just because someone finally believes in me. This is not belief. It's bait. He stepped closer. You can't stand it, can you? You can't stand that someone who knew Dad sees what you never did. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to hold him. I wanted to go back 40 years and start over. Instead, I said, if you sign with Victor, you may lose more than money. Something flickered in his eyes, but Emily opened the door wider behind him. Michael, she said coldly, are you going to let her do this again? That one word sealed the moment. Michael looked at me, and whatever doubt had begun to form disappeared. Go home, Mom, please. I said, go home. Ethan appeared behind Emily, then small and uncertain. Nana. My heart cracked. Michael turned his head. Ethan, go finish your homework. But now. The boy vanished. I looked at my son one last time. Michael, one day you are going to learn that not everyone who praises your father is your friend, and not everyone who warns you is your enemy. His face hardened. You should have thought about that before you spent my whole life being one. I walked back to my car with my body steady and my soul shaking. As I drove away, I saw Victor Hayes in my mind, smiling somewhere in the dark, knowing exactly which wound to press. And for the first time in more than 20 years, I understood that silence was no longer protecting Michael. Silence was helping Victor. I did not sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael standing on his porch with Emily behind him and Ethan watching from the hallway. I heard my son's voice again and again. You should have thought about that before you spent my whole life being one. An enemy. That was what I had become in his mind. Not a mother who had worked nights until her knees swelled. Not the woman who had packed his lunches, cleaned his scraped elbows, sat through every school concert, and cried quietly when he first drove away without looking back. Not the person who had paid bills with shaking hands so his name would remain clean. An enemy. By dawn, I had made up my mind to try once more. Not because I believed Michael would listen. I knew better than that. I had lived long enough to understand that people trapped inside resentment do not hear warnings as love. They hear them as control. Still, a mother does not stop knocking just because the door has bruised her hand. I called him at 7:15. He did not answer. I texted. Please don't sign anything until we talk with Richard Bennett. One meeting. That's all I'm asking. 3 gray dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, his reply came. Stop. One word. It might as well have been a slammed door. An hour later, Emily called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me avoiding her would only give her another weapon. Samantha? She said, voice clipped and clean. You need to leave Michael alone. I am trying to protect him. No, you're trying to control him. That is not true. Do you hear yourself? A grown man finds an investor and suddenly his mother appears with warnings and old drama. You did this the first time and now you're doing it again. Do you hear yourself? A grown man finds an investor and suddenly his mother appears with warnings and old drama. You did this the first time and now you're doing it again. The first time I was right to be worried. The first time you refused to help him, then acted sad when he failed. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. Emily, you do not know what I have done. There was a short, sharp laugh. I know exactly what you've done. You make everything about sacrifice. You want people to think you're this saintly mother who gave up everything, but when Michael needed real support, you hid behind caution. I will not argue with you. Good. Then listen. Ethan's birthday is next weekend. If you come and bring up Victor contracts Robert or any of your warnings, we will ask you to leave. My breath caught. You would do that in front of Ethan? I would protect my family from negativity. There it was, my family. Not our family. Not your grandson. My family. I love Ethan, I said. Then don't ruin his day. The call ended. I sat in my chair for a long time afterwards, staring at the phone. Outside, a squirrel ran along the fence with a walnut in its mouth, busy preparing for winter. Even small creatures knew when to store protection before the cold arrived. I went to Ethan's birthday party anyway. I told myself I would not mention Victor. I would not argue. I would bring a gift smile for my grandson, eat a slice of cake, and leave before my heart showed too much on my face. The party was held in Michael and Emily's backyard. Blue balloons bobbed from the fence posts. A rented bounce house sagged in one corner. Children ran across the grass with juice boxes and plastic swords, their laughter bright and careless. Ethan saw me the moment I came through the side gate. Sam. He ran into me so hard, I nearly dropped the wrapped box in my arms. I held him tight. Happy birthday, sweetheart. I'm 11 now, he said proudly. I know, practically grown. He grinned and pulled me toward the patio table where his gifts were stacked. For a few minutes, love was simple. Ethan showed me the cupcakes. He showed me the soccer ball his friend had given him. He told me about his science project and how his teacher said he had engineering thinking, whatever that meant to an 11-year-old. Then I saw him. Victor Hayes stood near the grill beside Michael. The years had silvered his hair, but not softened him. He wore a tailored navy jacket to a child's backyard birthday party, as if casual joy were something he observed rather than joined. His smile was smaller than I remembered, but his eyes were exactly the same, cold, assessing, amused. He looked at me and lifted his paper cup in greeting. My stomach turned. Michael saw my face. "Mom," he said, walking over quickly. "Don't." I lowered my voice. "Why is he here? He's my guest at Ethan's birthday. He's becoming part of my business life. He should not be near your family." Michael's face flushed. "You don't get to decide who belongs near my family." Emily appeared beside him as if she had been waiting for the first spark. "Samantha," she said softly, too softly, "remember what we discussed." I looked from her to Michael. "You invited Victor Hayes to your son's birthday to prove a point." Michael's jaw tightened. "No, I invited a man who believes in me. You're the one making it ugly." Victor approached, then moving slowly, confidently, like a man entering a room he already owned. "Samantha Price," he said. "It's been a long time." The sound of my full name in his mouth made my skin crawl. "Not long enough." His smile widened slightly. Michael looked between us. "So you do know each other?" Victor gave a soft chuckle. "Your mother and I crossed paths during your father's business days. Robert was a passionate man. Big dreams. Don't talk about Robert like you respected him," I said. Victor tilted his head. "I respected his ambition." "Ambition is not the same as honesty." Michael stepped in front of me. "That's enough." I stared at my son. "You hear him praising the same ambition that nearly destroyed—" "Stop!" Michael snapped. Several people looked over. Children continued shrieking near the bounce house, unaware that something old and poisonous had entered the sunlight. Ethan stood by the gift table watching us. That stopped me more than Michael's anger did. I lowered my voice. "Please. One meeting with Richard. If I'm wrong, I'll never mention Victor again." Emily crossed her arms. "That's manipulation." "No," I said. "That is a promise." Michael shook his head. "You don't get it, Mom. Victor told me what Dad was trying to build before everything fell apart. He told me Dad wanted me to inherit something. He told me you shut everything down because you were afraid." Victor said nothing. He did not need to. He had already planted the words. I felt the old rage rise in me, hot and frightening. For 20 years, I had been careful. For 20 years, I had protected Robert's memory, protected Michael's heart, protected everyone but myself. And there stood Victor Hayes, wearing a good jacket at my grandson's birthday, feeding my son the same lie with a cleaner napkin. "Your father did not lose everything because I was afraid," I said. Michael's eyes narrowed. "Then why?" Victor's gaze sharpened. Emily went still. For one trembling second, the truth stood between us ready. Then Ethan walked over and slipped his hand into mine. "Nana," he whispered. "Are you leaving?" I looked down at him. His eyes were wide, worried already, learning that adults can turn happy days into battlefields. I swallowed the truth again. "Yes, sweetheart," I said softly. "I think I should." His face fell. "But cake is soon." "I know. Sorry." Michael looked away. Emily said nothing. Victor watched me with quiet satisfaction. I kissed Ethan's forehead. "I left your gift on the table. Open it whenever your mom says it's okay." "What is it? A telescope?" His eyes brightened for half a second. "For stars." "For stars," I said, "and for remembering that some things are still there even when you can't see them yet." I did not know if I was speaking to him or myself. I walked toward the side gate. Behind me, I heard Michael say, "This is what she does. She creates a scene, then leaves like the victim." I stopped. My hand rested on the gate latch. For years, that sentence would have made me turn around and defend myself. That day, I simply opened the gate. But Victor's voice followed me low enough that only I could hear as I passed him. Careful, Samantha. Old papers have a way of making everyone look dirty. I looked at him then, really looked, and I saw not just the man from the past, but the threat in the present. He was not afraid of Michael. He was not even afraid of the documents. He was afraid of what they would prove if they were placed in the right hands at the right time. I leaned closer and said, "Then I suppose we should let them speak clearly." For the first time, his smile faded. I drove home with dry eyes. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because something stronger than hurt had finally taken hold. Resolve. That night, I called Linda. "I saw Victor," I said. "I'm sorry. He threatened me." Linda went quiet. "Then we move. Yes, Samantha. I'm tired too." The next call was to Richard. He answered on the third ring. "It's time," I said. He did not ask what I meant. "I'll pull the archived file." After we hung up, I went to the closet in the hallway and took down the old storage box from the top shelf. It was heavier than I remembered. Dust coated the lid. My hands shook as I carried it to the dining table. Inside were the parts of my life I had tried to bury. Bank letters, settlement papers, copies of checks. A photograph of Robert and Victor standing outside Price Renovations beside a truck with fresh paint and stolen confidence. And beneath everything wrapped in a yellowed envelope, the first document Michael had signed without understanding what it made him responsible for. I spread the papers across the table. For once, they did not look like shame. They looked like witnesses. At midnight, I made myself a cup of tea I did not drink and sat among the evidence until morning. Michael had chosen not to hear me as his mother. So now he would have to hear the truth from paper numbers, signatures, and people who could no longer be dismissed as emotional. I did not want to expose Robert. I did not want to break my son's heart. But Victor had stepped into my grandson's backyard, and that changed everything. The old storage box sat on my dining table like a second coffin. For years, I had kept it hidden on the top shelf of the hall closet behind Christmas wreaths and a plastic bin full of Ethan's childhood drawings. I told myself it belonged there because the past belonged behind things people only took down once a year. But that night with Victor Hayes back in my son's life, the box no longer felt like something buried. It felt like something waiting. The cardboard had softened at the corners. One side was stained from a basement leak years ago. Across the lid in Robert's handwriting were the words, "Price Renovations, tax copies." Even after all this time, seeing his handwriting made me feel two things at once: grief for the husband I once loved, and anger at the man who had left me with the wreckage of his choices. I lifted the lid. The smell came first. Old paper dust, a faint trace of mildew, and something metallic like filing cabinets in a courthouse basement. Inside were folders Richard had helped me label more than 20 years earlier. Client settlements, bank records, supplier claims, Michael's signature copies. Robert. Inside were folders Richard had helped me label more than 20 years earlier. Client settlements, bank records, supplier claims, Michael's signature copies. Robert personal notes, Victor Hayes. My fingers paused over Victor's folder. Even touching his name felt like inviting him into my house. I opened client settlements first. The first document was a letter from a couple named Harold and June Mercer. They had been in their late 60s when they hired Price Renovations to convert their downstairs bathroom after Harold's stroke. I remembered June's voice on the phone, trembling with humiliation, because she had trusted Robert after he sat at her kitchen table and promised, I treat every home like it belongs to my own mother. They gave him a deposit. Robert spent it before the permit was even filed. The job was never completed. When everything began falling apart, June called our house and asked me whether my husband was an honest man. I had no answer that would not break both of us. In the folder was the cashier's check I had sent them from my own savings. $7,800. At the time, that was nearly everything I had put aside for a newer car. Mine had been making a grinding sound every winter morning, but I kept driving it for 3 more years. Next came the Delaney file, then the Whitaker file, then the Ortiz file. Each folder had a story. A kitchen torn apart and abandoned, a porch roof left unsafe, a basement renovation paid for with money borrowed against a retirement account, older couples, widows, working families, people who had trusted Robert's smile and Victor's contracts. And behind every settlement was the same quiet truth. If I had not paid something, if Richard had not negotiated carefully, if Linda had not untangled the accounts, lawsuits would have multiplied until Michael's name appeared in places no young man's name should ever appear. I opened the bank records next. There it was, my second mortgage. The document still made my stomach tighten. I remembered sitting across from the loan officer at Huntington Bank. My nurse's uniform folded in my lap because I had gone straight there after a 12-hour shift. My eyes were dry and burning. My hands smelled faintly of antiseptic no matter how much I washed them. "Mrs. Price," the loan officer had said, "are you sure you want to proceed?" No, I was not sure. I was terrified. But Richard had explained the numbers. The settlement offers had deadlines. Several clients were prepared to sue not only Robert and the company, but anyone whose signature connected them to the agreements. And Michael's signature, my young, trusting son's signature, was on enough paperwork to create danger. Not guaranteed ruin, danger. That was the word Richard used. Samantha, he had told me, I believe we can argue he didn't understand what he signed. I believe we can argue Robert and Victor misled him. But court is not a clean room. Once he is named, even if he wins, the damage could follow him for years. Michael was 22 then, proud, stubborn, still convinced his father was teaching him the family trade. He had no idea Robert had placed him near the edge of a legal cliff and called it inheritance. So I signed the loan papers. I put my house in danger to keep my son from discovering that his father had already endangered him first. The next folder was my retirement account. I almost did not open it. There are sacrifices a person makes in the moment because there is no other choice. But seeing them years later printed in black ink can feel like being injured all over again. Withdrawal penalties, tax consequences, reduced projected benefits. I had once planned to retire at 62, maybe travel a little, maybe visit Savannah in the spring, maybe take a train through the Rockies like I had dreamed of since I was a girl. Instead, I worked nights long after my knees ached and my back stiffened before every shift. At 58, I was still lifting patients, checking IVs, calming frightened families, and walking hospital corridors at 3 a.m. while my own family believed I had simply chosen work over warmth. No one knew those night shifts were paying for old sins that were not mine. I moved to the folder marked Michael's signature copies. My hand shook before I opened it. The first page was a subcontractor agreement. Michael's name appeared near the bottom in blue ink. Michael R. Price. I remembered that signature because I had watched him write it once on a birthday card for Robert. He had been so proud of the way his name looked as an adult. Strong, slanted, certain. On the agreement, Robert had listed him as an authorized junior project manager. Michael had never managed the project. He had visited the property twice. He had helped carry cabinet-swept floors and listened while Robert told him, "This is how men build something." The second document was worse. a client acknowledgement form stating that Michael Price had received funds on behalf of Price Renovations. He had not. Robert had, or Victor had. But Michael's name sat there like a trap. I could still hear Richard's voice from that terrible meeting decades earlier. Some of these signatures may be authentic. Some may be copied or misused. The problem is not just whether he signed. The problem is what Robert and Victor attached his name to afterward. At the time, I had felt the room spin. My son could be charged. Richard had leaned back slowly. I am not saying that is likely. I am saying if angry clients and prosecutors start looking for fraud, we do not want Michael standing anywhere near the center of the paper trail. Fraud. That word had nearly stopped my heart. Not mistake. Not bad business. Not poor planning. Fraud. I closed the folder and pressed both hands against it. For years, I had told myself I saved Michael from debt, lawsuits, embarrassment. But that was the softened version. The version I could survive saying aloud. The harder truth was this: I had protected him from the possibility of criminal suspicion because his father had been willing to let his name sit on poisoned documents. That truth was too heavy for any mother to carry cleanly. I opened Robert's personal notes last. There were fewer pages than the others. Robert had not been a man who liked leaving proof behind. But near the bottom was the note I had found after his diagnosis folded inside an old estimate book. Sam, if things get ugly, tell Michael I was trying to build something for him. He won't understand the rest. Maybe that's better. You always were stronger with consequences than I was. It was not an apology. Not really. Robert had a way of circling guilt without stepping into it. You always were stronger with consequences than I was. What he meant was, I made the mess and you will clean it because you can bear being hated better than I can bear being exposed. I folded the note carefully and placed it aside. Then I opened Victor's folder. There were copies of old emails. Linda had printed invoices with inconsistent dates memos showing funds transferred between accounts and one photograph of Victor and Robert standing beside a white company truck. Robert was smiling broadly. Victor's smile was smaller, sharper. Even then, he looked less like a partner than a man measuring the value of everyone around him. At the back of the folder was Richard's handwritten note from 20 years ago. Do not contact Hayes directly. If he reappears, call me. If he reappears. Richard had written it like a warning from a storm map. And now the storm had a new address, Michael's house. By sunrise, my dining room looked like an evidence room. Papers covered the table in careful stacks. I had made notes on yellow legal pads, settlement amounts, dates, names, which accounts I used, which checks cleared, which documents tied Michael to Robert's deals, which ones suggested Victor had structured the trap. My body ached from sitting, but my mind had gone strangely calm. For the first time in years, I saw the shape of the whole story. Not the emotional version, not the family version, the factual one. Robert had wanted greatness without discipline. Victor had wanted profit without conscience. Michael had wanted a father worthy of worship. And I had wanted my son safe badly enough to let myself become the villain. At 8:12 that morning, Linda arrived with 2 boxes of her own. She stood in my dining room doorway, looked at the table, and pressed a hand to her chest. Oh, Samantha. I could not tell if it was pity or admiration. Maybe both. I kept more than I thought I said. Good. She set her boxes down. Inside were ledgers, tax summaries, copies of invoices, and old reconciliation reports from Price Renovations. Linda had kept them because accountants like nurses know that memory is fragile, but paper endures. Together, we began matching my payments to Robert's debts. By noon, we had a timeline. By 3, we had a list of documents Richard needed to review. By sunset, we had found something that made Linda remove her glasses and sit back in silence. What I asked. She pointed to a transfer record. This account. I leaned closer. What about it? It was opened in Michael's name. My blood went cold. He didn't open an account. I know. Her voice had changed. She pulled another page from the stack, then another. Robert and Victor moved client deposits through it. Not much, not compared to the whole mess. But enough. I gripped the back of a chair. Enough for what Linda looked at me with tired eyes. Enough that if anyone had looked closely back then, Michael might not have just been named in a civil suit. He could have been questioned as part of the scheme. The room blurred. I had known it was bad. I had not known that. Or maybe I had refused to know it fully. Linda reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. You saved him, Samantha. I shook my head as tears slipped down my face. No, I whispered. I only delayed the truth. Linda squeezed my hand. Sometimes delaying the truth is the only way to keep a young life from being destroyed before it has a chance to understand itself. I looked at the papers spread across my table. For 20 years, they had been a burden. Now they were becoming a mirror. And soon, whether Michael wanted it or not, he would have to look. The first time I understood Robert had truly endangered Michael, I was standing in the doorway of our garage with a laundry basket in my arms. It was a Thursday evening in late November, more than 20 years before Victor Hayes walked into my grandson's birthday party. The weather had turned bitter overnight. Rain tapped against the garage roof, and the air smelled like wet leaves and gasoline. I had gone out there looking for a missing box of Christmas ornaments, something simple and harmless. Instead, I found a stack of folders hidden beneath a blue plastic tarp. At first, I thought they were old estimates. Robert was always leaving paperwork in strange places on the workbench in the truck under coffee mugs inside paint buckets. But when I picked up the top folder, a folded check copy slipped out and landed near my shoe. The payee line read, Price Renovations. The memo line said, Mercer Bathroom Deposit. The date was 6 months earlier. I knew that job. I knew because Mrs. Mercer had called twice asking when Robert would return to finish the work. Robert had told me the Mercers were difficult people and that he was sorting it out. The check had cleared. The bathroom had not been finished. I set the laundry basket down. 1 folder became 3. 3 became 12. Inside were contracts, deposit slips, handwritten notes, change orders, and copies of forms I had never seen before. Some had Robert's signature. Some had Victor Hayes's. And then I saw the first document with Michael's name on it. Michael R. Price, Authorized Representative. My knees went weak. Michael was 22 then. He still came over for dinner on Sundays, still wore Robert's company jacket, still believed being included in business paperwork meant his father trusted him. He had signed forms because Robert told him that was how a family business worked. I had warned him to read everything. He had laughed and said, Dad wouldn't put me in a bad spot. A bad spot. Such a small phrase for what I held in my hands. I carried the folders into the kitchen and waited for Robert. He came home just after 9, smelling of cold air and whiskey mints. He smiled when he saw me at the table. Long day, Sam. I pushed 1 folder toward him. His smile faded. Where did you get that? In the garage. You had no right going through my business files. No right, I repeated. Michael's name is on these. Robert took off his coat slowly. Lower your voice. Why is Michael listed as an authorized representative on client funds he never handled? He looked toward the hallway, though Michael no longer lived with us. Habit. Guilt. Fear. I could not tell. It's standard, he said. No, it isn't. You don't understand construction. I understand signatures. I understand deposits. I understand elderly people calling my house asking why work wasn't finished after they paid you. Robert's face hardened. That's Victor's side of the operation. Your name is on it too. He structured the financing. You took the money. He slammed his hand on the table so hard the salt shaker jumped. I was trying to keep this company alive. I did not flinch. At Michael's expense. Your name is on it too. He structured the financing. You took the money. He slammed his hand on the table so hard the salt shaker jumped. I was trying to keep this company alive. I did not flinch. At Michael's expense. His eyes changed then. Not with remorse, with calculation. Michael is fine. He signed these. He signed basic acknowledgments. Nothing serious. Then why hide them? The room went silent. The refrigerator hummed. Rain struck the windows. Somewhere inside me, something that had been bending for years finally began to break. Robert, I said, tell me the truth. He laughed, but there was no warmth in it. You never wanted the truth. You wanted a quiet life, safe job, safe house, safe little retirement plan. Some of us wanted more. Did you use our son's name to take client money? His face went pale with anger. Don't say it like that. How should I say it? I was building something for him. You were building a trap around him. He looked away. That was the answer. I called Richard Bennett the next morning. Richard had handled a few basic legal matters for us before Robert's company paperwork, our wills, a property dispute with a neighbor. He was calm, careful, and impossible to impress with charm. That was why Robert never liked him. I brought 2 grocery bags full of documents to Richard's office downtown. He read for nearly an hour without speaking. Every minute felt like a punishment. Finally, he removed his glasses and looked at me. Samantha, he said. Where is Michael at work, I think? Why? Has anyone contacted him? Clients, police attorneys. My hands went cold. Police, I need you to listen carefully. I am not saying charges are coming, but these documents are dangerous. I gripped the arms of the chair. He didn't know. I believe you. He signed what his father told him to sign. He thought he was learning. I believe you, Richard repeated. But belief and proof are not the same. That sentence became a scar. Richard spread the papers across his desk and explained what I could barely absorb. Several clients had paid deposits for work never completed. Some funds moved through accounts connected to Price renovations. At least one account had Michael's name attached as a junior authorized user. Some forms suggested he acknowledged receipt of funds. Whether he understood them or not, whether he benefited or not, his name existed in the paper trail. Victor Hayes designed this, I asked. Richard's mouth tightened. Victor likely designed the structure. Robert allowed it. Maybe participated more than allowed. My husband would let our son take the fall. Richard did not answer quickly. That was when I knew. I drove home in a state beyond anger. Robert was in the garage when I arrived pretending to organize tools. I stood in the doorway. Richard says Michael is exposed. Robert froze. You went to Bennett, yes. Damn it, Samantha. Did you intend to let Michael carry this if things collapsed? He turned around, eyes wild. You think I planned this? You think I woke up one morning and decided to hurt my son? I think you loved being admired more than you loved being honest. His face twisted. You don't know what pressure feels like. I worked 3 double shifts last month to cover your supplier bills. That's different. No, I said. That's the difference between responsibility and performance. He moved toward me, then stopped. For the first time in our marriage, I saw fear in him. Not fear of losing me. Not fear of losing Michael. Fear of being seen. Victor said we could clean it up before anyone noticed, he muttered. Victor lied. He has contacts. He has victims. Robert wiped a hand over his face. I needed time. You used Michael to buy it. He sank onto a wooden stool. He wanted in. He wanted to be part of it. He wanted his father to be proud of him. Those words landed between us like a verdict. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Robert said the sentence that changed how I saw him forever. If this goes bad, Michael can say he didn't understand. He's young. People will believe him. I stared at my husband. You were willing to gamble with that. It won't come to that, but you were willing. He looked away again. I left the garage before I did something I could not undo. Over the next weeks, my life became a series of secret meetings and impossible choices. Richard contacted clients quietly. Linda reconstructed accounts late into the night. I learned the language of settlement agreements, release clauses, payment schedules, lien waivers, and personal guarantees. I learned how expensive silence could be. I also learned how far a mother can go before she recognizes herself. I cashed savings bonds my parents had left me. I withdrew from my retirement account. I took out the second mortgage. I accepted extra shifts until younger nurses began asking if I ever went home. Each payment bought time. Each signed release moved Michael one step farther from the center of the wreckage. He never knew. During that same period, Michael came by one Sunday wearing Robert's jacket, smiling like a young man on the edge of greatness. Dad says things are turning around, he told me. I was standing at the stove stirring soup with hands swollen from work. Did he? Yeah. He said once the old clients stop making noise, we'll be fine. Dad says things are turning around. He told me. I was standing at the stove stirring soup with hands swollen from work. Did he? Yeah. He said once the old clients stop making noise, we'll be fine. The spoon slipped from my hand into the pot. Michael frowned. Mom. I turned around slowly. What did he tell you about the old clients? That some people expect something for nothing. I looked at my son's face, so open, so proud, so dangerously loyal, and I realized Robert was not only hiding behind Michael's name on paper. He was shaping Michael's heart against the very people he had hurt. That night, after Michael left, I told Robert he had to shut the company down. He refused. You'll ruin me, he said. No, I answered. You already did that. I'm trying to keep you from ruining our son. The final collapse came faster than any of us expected. Victor disappeared first. Not officially. Men like Victor rarely run in obvious ways. He simply became hard to reach. Meetings canceled, calls unanswered, files missing. Robert panicked, then raged, then drank, then cried. By the time Richard finished negotiating the most urgent settlements, Robert's reputation was damaged, the company was dead, and my marriage had become a house where two people lived on opposite sides of the truth. But Michael was safe, not untouched. No one comes through a family lie untouched. But legally, financially, publicly safe. At least that was what I believed. Until years later, when I realized safety bought with silence becomes another kind of danger. Because Michael did not know his father had nearly sacrificed him. He did not know Victor had helped build the trap. He did not know I had stepped into the wreckage with both hands open and paid everything I could to pull him out. All he knew was that his father's company died, his father's dreams died, and his mother stood nearby holding the paperwork. So he blamed me, and because I loved him, I let him. After Robert's company collapsed, people thought the worst part of my life was over. They were wrong. The collapse was loud for a while. Phone calls, letters, meetings with Richard, late-night reviews of documents with Linda. Robert pacing the kitchen, blaming Victor one minute and me the next. But eventually, loud disasters become quiet consequences. The phone rings less. People stop asking questions. The neighborhood moves on. Friends decide they do not want to know too much. And then you are left alone with the payments. That was the part no one saw. Robert's health began failing not long after Price renovations closed. At first, he called it stress. Then, indigestion. Then, fatigue. By the time he agreed to see a doctor, the cancer had already made itself comfortable inside him. I wish I could say his illness softened everything between us. It did not. Illness can make some people honest. It can also make others cling harder to the story they want remembered. Robert became smaller in his body, but larger in Michael's imagination. The weaker he got, the more carefully he shaped the legend he would leave behind. Michael visited him often. He would sit beside the bed and listen while Robert spoke in a tired, noble voice about dreams cut short, risks misunderstood, and a wife who never had the stomach for greatness. I heard enough from the hallway. Sometimes I stood there with a laundry basket pressed against my hip, wondering whether grief gave a dying man the right to lie. One evening, I walked into Robert's room after Michael left. Robert was staring at the ceiling. "You told him I killed the business," I said. He did not look at me. I told him what he could survive. "No," I said. "You told him what made you look clean." His jaw tightened. "Do you want him to know everything? Is that what you want? You want him to know? His father made mistakes." "Mistakes," I repeated. His eyes finally turned toward mine. "You think he'll thank you for the truth? He'll break Sam. He worships me." There it was. Not regret, not fear for Michael's soul. Pride. Even dying, Robert needed to remain worshipped. "He deserves honesty," I said. "He deserves a father." That sentence trapped me because I knew what losing a father could do. My own father had died when I was 30, and even then, with a husband and child of my own, I felt like the floor had shifted beneath me. Michael was still young enough to need Robert in ways that had nothing to do with facts. So I compromised with silence. I told myself it was mercy. I told myself there would be time later. Robert died in February during a sleet storm that turned the hospital windows silver. Michael held one hand. I held the other. Near the end, Robert looked at our son and whispered, "Build what I couldn't." Michael sobbed like a child. I stood on the other side of the bed, holding the hand of a man I had loved, feared, resented, protected, and buried long before his heart stopped. At the funeral, everyone spoke of Robert's big dreams. His sister Diane said he was a man ahead of his time. A former client said, "Robert could make you believe anything was possible." That one almost made me laugh in the church pew. Not because it was false, because it was too true. Michael gave the final remarks. He stood at the front of the chapel in a dark suit, face pale, voice shaking. "My father taught me to dream bigger than my circumstances," he said. "He taught me that some people build even when others doubt them." His eyes moved to me on the word others. Not everyone noticed. I did. After the funeral, the real work began. Robert left no life insurance worth mentioning. What little there was went toward burial costs and medical bills. I still had the second mortgage. I still had payment schedules from the settlement agreements. I still had tax penalties from the retirement withdrawal. I still had regular household expenses, and now I had them on one income. So I worked. I worked like grief was something I could outrun. I took weekend shifts, holiday shifts, night shifts younger nurses avoided. I learned which vending machine coffee tasted least burned at 4 a.m. I learned how to sleep in 3-hour pieces. I learned to stretch a rotisserie chicken across 4 meals and pretend I liked soup more than I did. People at church complimented my strength. They did not know strength sometimes looks exactly like having no alternative. Every month, I mailed payments connected to Robert's mess. Some went through Richard's office. Some went directly to negotiated accounts. Some went to banks. Some went to suppliers who had agreed not to pursue further action if the terms were met. Each envelope felt like buying Michael another day of ignorance. I watched my retirement shrink on paper. I watched my body age faster than my years. I watched Michael grow colder. He came by less after Robert died. When he did visit, he wandered through the house like he was searching for something I had stolen from him. He looked at Robert's empty chair with tenderness. He looked at me with accusation. One afternoon, about 6 months after the funeral, he found me sorting old bills at the kitchen table. "Still cleaning up your mess?" he asked. I looked up slowly. "My mess? Dad said you panicked when the business hit trouble, that you forced him to shut it down." I placed one bill on top of another. "Carefully. Too carefully. Your father said many things when he was sick." Michael's eyes hardened. "Don't do that. Do what act like dying made him dishonest." I wanted to ask what made him dishonest before that. Instead, I said, "I'm not going to argue about your father." "Of course not, because then you'd have to admit what you did." That became our pattern. He accused. I swallowed. He defended Robert. I paid Robert's debts. Years passed that way. Linda checked in when she could. Richard sent occasional updates when a final release came through. Each one should have felt like relief. Instead, every closed file reminded me that Michael was building his entire understanding of his life on the wrong foundation. Once Linda came to my house with a folder and found me sitting at the kitchen table in my scrubs, my head in my hands. "You cannot keep doing this forever," she said. "I'm almost done with the Mercer schedule. I don't mean the money." I looked at her. She sat across from me. I mean, carrying Robert's version of history. I shook my head. "Michael isn't ready." "Samantha, he may never be ready. Then what am I supposed to do? Hand him documents proving his father used him?" Linda's face softened. "No. But you need to stop letting Robert use you too." That stayed with me, because that was exactly what had happened. Robert was gone, but his lie still had hands. It still moved through Michael's voice. It still pushed me into silence. It still took money from my account, sleep from my nights, and warmth from my relationship with my son. But I kept choosing silence. Not because I was noble, because I was afraid. I was afraid Michael would collapse under the truth. I was afraid he would hate me for hiding it. I was afraid he would hate Robert and then hate himself for loving him. I was afraid that if I told him everything, I would not get my son back. I would lose the last fragile thread connecting us. So I protected the thread. Even when it cut into my hand. The last major settlement payment cleared when I was 61. I remember sitting in my car outside the bank, looking at the receipt and feeling nothing at first. No joy, no triumph, just a hollow quiet. Then I started crying so hard I could not drive. A woman tapped on my window and asked if I was all right. I wiped my face and said, "Yes, I just finished paying for something." She smiled kindly, not understanding. "That must feel good." I nodded, but it did not feel good. It felt like finishing a prison sentence no one knew I had served. By then, Michael had rewritten the past completely. In his version, Robert had been the visionary destroyed by a fearful wife. Michael had been the son denied his inheritance. I had been the woman who chose caution over love, and because I had no defense, I was willing to speak the lie settled into the family like dust. Emily believed it because it suited her. Diane repeated it because it protected her brother. Michael carried it because it gave shape to his failures. Only 3 people knew the truth: Linda, Richard, and me. I thought that would be enough. I thought if the debts were paid, if the releases were signed, if Michael built a decent life, eventually the secret could die quietly with my generation. But secrets do not die just because we bury them. They wait for the person who benefits from them to come back. And Victor Hayes was patient enough to wait. Michael invited me to his house on a Friday evening. That alone should have warned me. By then, he had not invited me anywhere unless there was an audience, an obligation, or something he needed. Still, when his name appeared on my phone, some foolish, hopeful part of me answered, like a mother instead of a woman who knew better. "Mom," he said, his voice unusually controlled, "we're having a small dinner tomorrow. I want you to come." I sat at my dining table where the documents were now organized into 3 neat stacks. A dinner. Yes, Emily's parents will be there. Diane too. Victor is stopping by for a business discussion afterward. My hand tightened around the phone. Victor Hayes. Don't start. Michael, I'm inviting you because this concerns the family. Family. That word had been used so many ways in my life, it no longer knew what shape to take. What exactly concerns the family? He exhaled impatiently. Just come tomorrow at 6. Before I could ask anything else, he hung up. I called Richard immediately. He's bringing Victor into a family dinner, I said. Richard was quiet for a moment. Then Victor wants something that looks voluntary. What does that mean? It means if Michael is about to ask you for anything, do not sign. Not a note, not a witness line, not a consent form, nothing. I wasn't planning to. Samantha, people get pressured in rooms where everyone is looking at them. I glanced at the stacks of papers on my table. Linda and I have been organizing everything. Good. I'll have the archived file ready by Monday. Samantha, people get pressured in rooms where everyone is looking at them. I glanced at the stacks of papers on my table. Linda and I have been organizing everything. Good. I'll have the archived file ready by Monday. Monday may be too late. Another pause. Then take Linda with you. I almost said no. Pride still has a voice even when we claim to be too old for it. But I was tired of walking into rooms alone, where my pain was treated like a character flaw. I'll ask her, I said. Linda answered on the first ring. When I explained, she did not hesitate. I'll be there. The next evening, I arrived at Michael's house with my purse on my shoulder and my heart somewhere near my throat. Linda followed in her own car and parked across the street. We had agreed she would not come in immediately, not unless I called or texted. Are you sure? She asked before I crossed the street. No, I said, but I'm going in. The house smelled of roast chicken garlic and something sweet baking in the oven. Emily opened the door wearing a cream blouse and the expression of a woman who had already decided the evening's ending. Samantha, she said, you're on time. I usually am. Her smile tightened. In the dining room, Emily's parents sat stiffly with glasses of iced tea. Diane was there too, Robert's sister wearing a black cardigan and the same loyal grief she had worn since his funeral. Ethan sat near the end of the table, older now, quieter around adults, who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. Nana, he said softly. I crossed the room and hugged him. Hi, sweetheart. He held on longer than usual. That scared me. Michael stood by the fireplace, wearing a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up, like a man ready to work. Victor Hayes sat in the armchair as if he belonged there. He gave me a polite nod. Samantha. I did not return it. Dinner was unbearable in the way polite dinners can be unbearable. People passed bread, complimented Emily's potatoes, discussed Ethan's school, and avoided the things sitting in the room like smoke. Victor did not eat much. He watched. When the plates were cleared, Emily brought coffee. Then Michael stood. Before dessert, he said, "I want to talk about an opportunity." My stomach tightened. Ethan looked down at his lap. Michael continued, "Victor has offered me a chance to partner on a property redevelopment project. It's bigger than anything I've done before, but it's solid. Real numbers. Real backing." Diane smiled sadly. "Your father would be so proud." I looked at her. Would he, or would he recognize the same bait wrapped in cleaner paper? Michael picked up a folder from the sideboard. "There's one issue," he said. "Collateral." Emily sat beside him, hands folded. I already knew. Still, hearing it was different. "The bank wants additional security," Michael said. "Victor is willing to structure around it, but if I can show family support, the terms improve." I said nothing. He looked directly at me. "Mom, I need you to let me use your house as a temporary guarantee." The room went silent. My house. Again. The same little brick ranch I had nearly lost, saving him from a disaster he still blamed me for. "No," I said. Michael's face tightened, but he stayed calm. "Too calm. You haven't seen the numbers." "I don't need to." Emily leaned forward. "Samantha, this is exactly the problem. You refuse before listening. I listened 20 years ago. I listened 3 years ago. I listened when he warned me not to start. I listened while he called me his enemy. I'm done listening to requests that put my home at risk." Michael's eyes flashed. "My home. Your home. That house exists because Dad worked for it too." I stared at him. "No, Michael. That house exists because I kept paying for it after your father nearly lost it." Diane gasped. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. Michael's voice dropped. "Don't talk about Dad like that." "Then stop using his ghost to rob me of my own roof." Emily stood. "That is dramatic and unfair." "No," I said, turning to her. "Dramatic is inviting an old predator into your home and calling it opportunity." Victor smiled faintly. "Samantha, that's a serious accusation. I meant it seriously." Michael slammed the folder onto the table. "You see, this is what she does. Every time I get close to something, she poisons it." Ethan flinched. That small movement nearly broke me. Michael pointed at me, voice rising now. "You want to know why I failed? Because I spent my whole life with a mother who made fear sound like wisdom. You held money over me. You held the house over me. You held Dad's memory hostage because you couldn't stand that he dreamed bigger than you. I felt every eye on me." Emily's parents looked uncomfortable. Diane looked wounded on Robert's behalf. Emily looked triumphant. Victor looked patient. And Ethan looked afraid. Michael stepped closer. "You owe me this." "No," I said quietly. "I do not." His face twisted. "You owe me for the company Dad lost. You owe me for the chances you blocked. You owe me for every time you made me feel like I wasn't enough." My voice shook, but I did not look away. "I did not make you feel that way, Michael. Your failures hurt, but they belong to you." He laughed bitterly. "There it is. The real Samantha Price. The real Samantha Price is the woman who has been protecting you from rooms exactly like this." Victor stood then. "Perhaps we should pause. This is becoming emotional." I turned to him. "No, Victor. This is becoming honest." For the first time all evening, his polished calm cracked. Michael saw it too, but he misunderstood it. "Don't speak to my investor like that." "Investor," I said. "That man stood beside your father while client deposits moved through accounts they had no right using." Victor's smile vanished. Emily whispered, "Michael, don't let her do this." Michael's face went red. "You're lying. I wish I were. You are lying because you can't control me anymore." I reached into my purse, but my fingers stopped on the envelope inside. Not yet. Not in this room. Not while Victor could twist every word. Instead, I pulled out my phone and sent one word to Linda. Now. Michael was still talking. You sat there all these years acting like some wounded saint, but you were the reason everything fell apart. Dad told me. He told me before he died. I looked at him, and this time my heart did not collapse under the accusation. It steadied. Because the doorbell rang. Emily turned sharply. Who is that? I answered before anyone else could. Someone who kept the records. Michael stared at me. The doorbell rang again. Victor's eyes moved toward the front door, and in that brief glance, I saw something I had waited 20 years to see. Fear. Emily went to the door with stiff steps. A moment later, Linda Carter walked into the dining room, carrying a leather briefcase. Behind her came Richard Bennett, slower than he used to be, leaning slightly on a cane, but with his old courtroom eyes clear and sharp. Michael froze. Mr. Bennett. Richard looked at him sadly. Hello, Michael. Linda set her briefcase on the table. Then she looked at Victor. You should sit down, she said. The room went completely still. Victor gave a cold smile. I don't believe this concerns you. Linda opened the briefcase. Oh, she said it concerns me. I balanced the books you tried to bury. Michael turned toward me, confusion breaking through his anger for the first time. Mom, what is this? I looked at my son. The boy I had saved, the man who had blamed me. The child still trapped inside a lie his father left behind. This, I said softly, is the truth. You refuse to hear from me. For a moment, no one moved. Linda Carter stood at Michael's dining table with her leather briefcase open, calm as a judge. Richard Bennett remained beside her, one hand resting on his cane. His eyes fixed not on Michael, but on Victor Hayes. I had known Richard long enough to recognize that expression. It was the look he used when a lie had finally made the mistake of entering a room where proof was waiting. Michael stared at the papers in Linda's hands. What truth? He asked. His voice was still defensive, but the sharp edge had dulled. Confusion had entered it. Confusion was dangerous for pride. It made room for fear. For pride, it made room for fear. Emily stepped closer to him. Michael, you don't have to listen to this. Your mother planned this. Linda looked at her. No, Mrs. Price. V. Ichter planned this. Samantha survived it. Emily stepped closer to him. Michael, you don't have to listen to this. Your mother planned this. Linda looked at her. No, Mrs. Price. Victor planned this. Samantha survived it. Emily's face flushed. Victor gave a small laugh. Linda, after all these years, I'm surprised you're still carrying grudges. Not grudges, Linda said. Records. She placed the first document on the table. This is a settlement summary from the Mercer account. Price Renovations received a deposit for an accessibility bathroom renovation. The work was not completed. The deposit was not returned by Robert Price or Victor Hayes. Diane made a small sound. Michael frowned. What does that have to do with me? Linda placed a second paper beside the first. This is the cashier's check used to resolve the claim before litigation expanded. Michael leaned forward. His eyes moved over the page. I watched the moment he saw my name. Samantha Price. His mouth tightened. That doesn't prove anything. Maybe she paid because she was responsible. No, Richard said, speaking for the first time. Your mother paid because your name had begun appearing in company documents connected to client funds. Michael looked up sharply. My name, Victor, shifted slightly. Richard noticed. Linda placed another document down. This is a client acknowledgement form. It states that Michael R. Price was authorized to receive project payments on behalf of Price Renovations. Michael stared at it. I never received client payments. I know, Linda said. He looked at me then, and for the first time that evening, his eyes held something other than blame. I wanted to reach for him. I did not. Richard stepped closer to the table. Michael, some of your signatures were genuine. You signed documents your father gave you. Some appear to have been attached to transactions afterward in ways you likely did not understand. Some records suggest your name was used to create the appearance of continuity in a family business structure. Michael shook his head. No. Dad said it was normal. I'm sure he did, Richard replied. Victor lifted his hands. This is ancient history, and it's being presented in the most dramatic possible way. Young men sign things in family businesses. That doesn't mean anything sinister happened. Linda turned a page toward him. Then you won't mind explaining this transfer ledger. Victor's smile thinned. Michael looked between them. What transfer ledger? Linda pointed to a line highlighted in yellow. Client deposits moved through an account connected to Price Renovations operations. One account had Michael's name attached as a junior authorized user. I didn't open any account, Michael said. His voice cracked on open. No, Linda said quietly. We do not believe you did. The dining room seemed to grow smaller. Emily's father lowered his eyes. Emily's mother covered her mouth. Diane stared at the papers as though they had insulted the dead. Michael grabbed the document and scanned it. This isn't possible. It is possible, Richard said, because your father and Victor created a structure where responsibility could blur if the business collapsed. Michael looked at Victor. Victor's expression had hardened. Michael, he said smoothly, you are a young man trying to learn. None of this would have touched you. Richard's cane tapped once against the floor. That is not true. Victor's eyes flashed. Richard continued. If several clients had filed coordinated complaints, if investigators had traced deposits through accounts Lynn had traced deposits through accounts Lynn kid to Michael, if opposing counsel had named every person whose signature appeared on receipt acknowledgments, Michael could have been pulled into civil litigation at minimum. At minimum, Ked to Michael, if opposing counsel had named every person whose signature appeared on receipt acknowledgments, Michael could have been pulled into civil litigation at minimum. At minimum, Michael whispered. Richard held his gaze. At worst, he could have been questioned as part of a fraud investigation. The word entered the room like a blade. Fraud. Michael sat down hard in the nearest chair. Emily whispered, No. I could not look away from my son. All those years, I had imagined this moment. I had feared his anger, his disbelief, his collapse. But I had not prepared myself for the sight of him shrinking under the weight of the truth. Linda placed more documents on the table. This is the Delaney release. This is the Ortiz release. This is the Whitaker supplier lien waiver. This is the amended settlement schedule negotiated through Mr. Bennett's office. Each one reduced exposure connected to company activity. Each one was funded in whole or in part by Samantha Price. Michael's hand moved to his forehead. Funded how? Linda looked at me. I nodded once. She continued. Second mortgage, retirement withdrawal, savings liquidation, additional income from hospital shifts. Michael's eyes lifted slowly. What hospital shifts? I answered softly. The night shifts you said I chose because I liked being away from the family. His face changed. Pain moved through it, then resistance, then pain again. Emily stepped in quickly. Michael, this still doesn't mean she wasn't part of the decision to close the company. Richard opened a folder of his own. Robert Price's company was insolvent. It was not closed because Samantha lacked vision. It was closed because the business had accepted money for work it could not complete, mismanaged funds, and placed legally dangerous documents in circulation. Diane stood. My brother was not a criminal. Richard turned to her with surprising gentleness. Diane, your brother was a complicated man, but love for the dead, does not erase paper. She sat back down, trembling. Victor said, "You're all forgetting something." Samantha benefited from blaming Robert. She controlled the house. The records. The Nair at the house? The records. The Nair at Ive. I almost laughed. The narrative, I said. Victor, I have lived 20 years inside the narrative you and Robert left me. He looked at Timmy with open dislike now. Careful, Ive. I almost laughed. The narrative, I said. Victor, I have lived 20 years inside the narrative you and Robert left me. He looked at me with open dislike now. Careful. Michael heard that. He looked up. Why did you say careful? Victor glanced at him. Because your mother has always had a talent for making herself appear wounded. Linda pulled out another paper. Then perhaps this will help. She placed it directly in front of Michael. It was a copy of my second mortgage agreement. His eyes moved over the amount. Then the date. Then my signature. His face drained of color. That was right after Dad's company closed. Yes, Linda said. Michael swallowed hard. You told me you refinanced because hospital hours were changing. I lied, I said. His eyes snapped to mine. I held his gaze. I lied because I did not want you to know your father had put you in danger. The room fell completely silent. There it was. No legal language, no careful framing, no softened edges. The truth plain enough to wound. Michael's lips parted, but no words came. Richard placed one final document on the table for that round. This is a memorandum I wrote after meeting with Samantha 20 years ago. It summarizes the risk to Michael and the recommended strategy to resolve claims quietly before his name became central. Michael reached for it with shaking hands. He read the first paragraph, then the second. Then he stopped. His voice was barely audible. You all knew Linda said yes. Dad knew. Richard's face tightened. Robert knew. Michael turned to Victor. You knew. Victor did not answer immediately. That hesitation did what no accusation could have done. Michael stood. You knew my name was on this stuff? Victor straightened his jacket. You were never in real danger. That's not what I asked. Emily grabbed Michael's arm. Don't let them turn you against the only person trying to help you. Michael pulled his arm free. The only person. His laugh was hollow. He looked back at the table at the documents spread like open graves. My mother paid all this. Linda said yes. For years, yes. To keep me out of it, Richard answered. To protect your future. Michael pressed both hands to the back of a chair and bent his head. I saw his shoulders begin to shake. Ethan moved from the hallway before anyone could stop him. Dad. Michael looked up quickly, wiping his face with the heel of his hand. Go upstairs, buddy. Ethan looked at me, then at the papers, then at his father. No, he said softly. Everyone turned. Ethan's voice trembled, but he stayed where he was. Everybody always says Nana makes things bad, but she's the only one crying when no one looks. My heart broke. Emily whispered Ethan upstairs, but he did not move. Michael stared at his son as if those words had reached a place adults could not. Then he looked at me. For the first time in decades, my son did not look angry. He looked lost. Mom, he whispered. What else is there? I closed my eyes for 1 second. Because we had shown him the payments. We had shown him the paper trail. We had shown him the danger. But not yet the final wound. Not yet Robert's own words. Richard seemed to understand. He touched the folder tucked beneath his arm. There is more, he said gently. But Michael, before we continue, you need to understand something clearly. Michael looked at him. Richard's voice was steady. Your mother did not destroy your father's company. She prevented his choices from destroying you. Michael sat down slowly, as if his legs could no longer carry the lie he had lived under. Victor moved toward the door. Linda's voice stopped him. Don't leave yet, Victor. He turned. She lifted one last sheet from her briefcase. We still need to discuss why after all these years you came back for Michael. Victor Hayes looked at Linda Carter as if she had forgotten her place. That was the thing about men like Victor. They could tolerate being challenged by other men, especially lawyers in expensive suits. But a 71-year-old accountant with gray hair, square glasses, and a briefcase full of numbers offended him in a deeper way. Linda did not look powerful. That was why she frightened him. I came back, Victor said smoothly, because Michael has talent. Linda did not blink. No. You came back because Michael had resentment. Michael flinched at the word. Victor turned toward him. You don't have to listen to this. Michael's hands were still pressed flat on the dining table, sir, pressed flat on the dining table, sir, bounded by papers bearing my name. His name, Robert's name, Victor's name. He looked like a man standing in the ruins of a house he had believed was solid. Then answer her, bounded by papers bearing my name. His name, Robert's name, Victor's name. He looked like a man standing in the ruins of a house he had believed was solid. Then answer her, Michael said. Victor's jaw tightened. Emily touched Michael's shoulder. Honey, don't let them overwhelm you. He shrugged her hand away. That small movement changed the room. Emily's face went pale with anger, but she said nothing. Richard opened another folder and placed a sheet on the table. This is a copy of correspondence between Victor Hayes and Robert Price from the final months of Price renovations. Victor laughed sharply. Correspondence? You make it sound official. Richard looked at him over the top of his glasses. It is official enough. Michael picked up the page. His eyes moved across the lines. I already knew what it said. I had read it the night before with Linda. Still hearing Michael's breath catch made the words new and cruel again. Robert had written Mike's signs clean. He doesn't ask questions. If we keep him listed as family continuity lenders and clients feel better. Below that, Victor had replied, good. Young names help. Makes it look like succession, not desperation. Michael's face crumpled in a way I had not seen since he was a child, trying not to cry. No, he whispered. Victor stepped forward. That is being taken out of context. Richard said, then provide the context. Victor's mouth closed. Michael looked at him. You talked about me like that. Victor's expression shifted into something almost pitying. Michael, business requires positioning. Your father was trying to keep things alive. With my name. You were his son. I was his shield. The word came from Michael before anyone else could say it. Shield. I felt tears sting my eyes, because for 20 years I had feared what the truth would do to him, but some part of him had understood it instantly. Beneath the pride, beneath the blame, beneath Robert's beautiful lies, Michael knew what betrayal looked like when the paper finally stopped pretending. Victor turned cold. You should be grateful anyone still believes you can build something. Michael stared at him. What did you just say? Victor realized too late that he had revealed the voice beneath the charm. Linda removed another document from her briefcase. Let's discuss the current deal. Victor's eyes snapped to her. No. Yes. Linda said calmly. This is the preliminary funding agreement you gave Michael. the one requiring personal guarantees, accelerated penalty triggers, and collateral assignment rights if project milestones are missed. Michael looked at Victor. You said the terms were standard. They are standard for high-risk redevelopment. Richard said, they are predatory. Emily finally spoke. Predatory how Richard turned a copy toward her. If Michael missed deadlines, Victor's company could assume controlling rights over the project. If family collateral were pledged, the exposure could extend beyond the property itself, depending on the addendum. Emily looked at the page, then at me. My house, I said softly. He wanted Michael to bring him my house. Victor's face hardened. No one forced Samantha to agree. No, Linda said. You were counting on shame to do that. The room fell silent again. Shame. That had been the tool from the beginning. Robert's shame, Michael's shame, my shame, Emily's fear of not rising, Diane's need to preserve her brother, even Ethan's small, quiet shame when adults fought in front of him. Victor had not created all of it. He had simply learned where to press. Michael sat down slowly. I almost signed, he said. Emily whispered. We needed this. Michael turned to her. We needed what? To put my mother's house at risk. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed defensive. We needed a real chance. I'm tired of watching you work small jobs while other men pass you by. I'm tired of waiting for your life to start. Michael's laugh was broken. My life didn't start because I kept chasing a dead man's approval. No one answered. Diane began crying quietly. Richard reached into his coat pocket then. He removed a yellowed envelope folded once the paper soft with age. I knew that envelope. My throat closed. Michael Richard said gently, There is one more thing. I shook my head before I realized I was doing it. Richard. He looked at me with compassion. He needs it. Samantha? Michael looked from Richard to me. What is it? I pressed one hand to my chest. It's from your father. The air changed. Michael froze. Richard held the envelope out to him. I kept a copy in the archived file. Your mother kept the original. Robert wrote it near the end of his illness, but he never gave it to you. Michael took it with trembling fingers. For a moment, he only stared at Robert's handwriting. Then he unfolded the letter. His voice shook as he read silently at first. His eyes moved faster, then stopped. He swallowed hard and began again from the top, this time aloud, as if he needed witnesses to prove the words were real. Sam, if you're reading this, then maybe things caught up with us after all. I don't know how much you'll tell Michael. Part of me hopes you never do. Part of me knows that's cowardice. I let the boy sign things he didn't understand. I told myself it was harmless because he was family, because I was going to fix everything, because Victor said names on paper could be cleaned up later. But the truth is, I liked seeing my son look at me like I was building an empire. I knew he trusted me. I used that trust. If there is blame, it belongs to me first. Victor pushed, but I opened the door. You were right about the accounts. You were right about the deposits. You were right that Michael could have been hurt by what I let happen. I don't have the courage to tell him. Maybe I never did. If you can protect him, do it. If he hates you for it, I am sorry. I have asked too much of you all our married life. Robert. Michael stopped reading. The letter slipped from his hands onto the table. No one breathed. Then Michael made a sound I had never heard from him before. Not a sob exactly, not a gasp. It was the sound of a man whose entire life had cracked down the middle. He covered his face with both hands. Dad knew, he said. I wanted to go to him, but my feet would not move. All the years between us stood in the room like a crowd. Michael looked up at Victor through tears. You knew too. Victor lifted his chin. Your father made his choices, and you came back to use me again. I came back with an opportunity. No, Michael said, standing. You came back because I was still stupid enough to hate the only person who had protected me. The words struck me so hard, I had to grip the chair beside me. Emily whispered, Michael. He turned on her. And you helped him. Her face twisted. I helped you believe in yourself. No, you helped me blame her. Emily recoiled as if slapped. Michael looked at me then. Really looked. Not through Robert's lie. Not through Emily's ambition. Not through his own shame. At me. His mother, the woman who had been standing there all along. Mom, he whispered. I shook my head, tears falling now. Not yet. Pain crossed his face. I'm sorry. I know you are beginning to be. That hurt him. I saw it. But I had learned something after 20 years of silence. A truth revealed too late still needs room to breathe. An apology given in the first shock of guilt is not the same as repentance. Victor reached for his folder. Richard's voice cut through the room. Leave the documents. Victor smiled coldly. Those are my copies. Linda said, and ours are already duplicated. For the first time, Victor looked old. Not weak, not defeated, but exposed. He gathered his coat and moved toward the door. At the hallway, Ethan stood watching his face pale. Victor paused as though he might say something charming to the boy. Michael stepped between them. Don't speak to my son. Victor looked at him, then at me. This family enjoys its martyrs, he said. I wiped my face. No, Victor. We're done making them. He left without another word. The front door closed, and in the silence after Michael sank to the floor beside the dining table surrounded by the truth. He bowed his head. This time, no one rushed to save him from it. Michael stayed on the floor for a long time. No one knew what to do with him there. Not Emily, not Diane, not even Richard, who had spent his life guiding people through terrible truths. The documents remained scattered across the dining table, but the real evidence was my son's face. He looked ruined, and I hated that I still wanted to comfort him. That is the cruelest part of being a mother. Even when your child has wounded you for years, the moment you see him bleeding, your first instinct is to stop the pain. My hands wanted to reach for his shoulders. My voice wanted to say, It's all right. I forgive you. Stand up, baby. But it was not all right, and forgiveness spoken too soon can become another hiding place. Michael lifted his head slowly. Mom, he said, his voice raw. I blamed you for everything. I stood near the end of the table, my arms wrapped around myself. Yes. The single word seemed to strike him harder than any speech could have. He swallowed. I told people you watched me fail. Yes, I let Emily keep Ethan away from you. Emily stiffened. I looked at him. Yes. His face crumpled again. I called you my enemy. My throat tightened. You did. He pressed both hands against his eyes. I didn't know. No, I said softly. You didn't know the documents. You didn't know the payments. You didn't know what your father and Victor had done. He looked up at me, hope and horror mixed together. But you knew I loved you. The room went silent. That was the truth beneath all the other truths. Michael had not known the whole past, but he had known enough of me. He had known the mother who stayed up during his fevers, who came to every school program after working all night, who mailed birthday cards even when he stopped calling, who never once let Ethan feel forgotten. He had known my heart. He had chosen Robert's story over it anyway. Michael nodded as if each word were a stone being placed on his chest. I did, he whispered. Emily wiped at her eyes, but her sadness had a sharp edge to it. Samantha, she said we all believed what Michael believed. I turned to her. No, Emily. You encouraged what Michael believed. Her face flushed. I was trying to support my husband. Supporting your husband does not require turning his mother into a villain. Michael looked at Emily then, not with rage, with a tired clarity that seemed to frighten her more than anger would have. You told Ethan she made me sad, he said. Emily opened her mouth, then closed it. Ethan stood halfway behind Richard, his small face pale. I heard it, he said. Emily looked at her son. Ethan, I never meant— Yes, you did, he said quietly. It was not cruel. That made it worse. Diane suddenly stood trembling. I can't listen to this. Robert was my brother. Richard looked at her gently. And Samantha was his wife. Diane's eyes filled. He loved Michael. I believe he did, Richard said. But love does not erase harm. Diane looked at me, then really looked, maybe for the first time since Robert died. You paid all that, I nodded. Her mouth trembled. I thought you were cold after he passed. You never defended him. You never cried in front of us. I cried where no one could use it against me. She sat down as if her legs had failed. Linda began gathering the most sensitive documents back into her briefcase. These copies should stay with Richard, she said. Victor may try to challenge the framing. Michael looked toward the door Victor had left through. What happens to him? Richard's expression hardened. I will review the current agreement. If there is evidence of predatory lending or fraudulent misrepresentation, there may be options. At minimum, Michael, you do not sign anything with him. Michael gave a hollow laugh. I'm not signing anything. I don't even know who I am right now. I knew that feeling. I had lived there for years. He rose slowly from the floor. For a moment, he looked like he might come toward me, but he stopped himself. Maybe he understood finally that pain does not give him automatic access to the person he hurt. Can I apologize? He asked. You can. His lips shook. I am sorry. I waited. He took a breath, then tried again. I am sorry for blaming you. I am sorry for believing Dad without questioning what you had lived through. I am sorry for every cruel thing I said, for asking for your house, for letting you stand alone in rooms where I should have stood beside you. Tears ran down his face. I am sorry for making you pay twice. First with money, then with my hatred. That one broke something open in me. I looked away toward the window because if I looked at him too long, I might soften before I was ready. I hear you, I said. His face twisted. But you don't forgive me. I turned back to him. I did not say that. Then, Michael, I love you. I have always loved you. But love is not permission to hurt me and then expect my arms to open the moment you feel guilty. He lowered his head. I know. No, I said more firmly. You are beginning to know. There is a difference. Emily began crying harder now, but I could not carry her too. For years, I had carried everybody's discomfort. Robert's pride, Michael's blame, Emily's ambition, Diane's grief. even Ethan's confusion. That night, I set the load down. I need boundaries, I said. Michael nodded quickly. Anything. You will not ask me for money collateral or business rescue again. I won't. You will not use Ethan as a reward or punishment in our relationship. His face collapsed with shame. You will not let anyone in this family speak about me as if I destroyed your life. He glanced at Emily. No one will, and you will get help. Help counseling, a financial advisor, a real mentor in your field who is not selling you a dream with hooks hidden inside it. You need to learn the difference between ambition and desperation. He nodded slowly. You're right. Those words sounded strange from him. You're right. For decades, I had heard versions of you don't understand. You're afraid you ruined it. You stood in my way. Hearing the opposite did not heal the wound instantly. It only showed me how deep the wound had been. Ethan walked toward me then. Not dramatically, not like in a movie. Just a boy crossing a dining room after too many adult lies had finally fallen apart. He wrapped his arms around my waist. I held him. His voice was muffled against my sweater. I knew you were good. I closed my eyes. Oh, sweetheart. I didn't know why everybody was mad at you. I know. I don't want Dad to be mad at you anymore. Michael made a broken sound. I looked over Ethan's head at my son. That part is up to your father now. Michael nodded, wiping his face. It is. Emily stood, arms wrapped around herself. What about us? She asked him. Michael looked at her for a long time. I don't know. Her face went white. He continued. I love you, but I don't know what we've built if so much of it depended on blaming my mother. Emily looked as if she might argue, but for once no argument came. Richard touched my shoulder lightly. We should go soon, he said. This family needs time. Linda closed her briefcase. I'll walk you out, Samantha. But Michael stepped forward. Mom? I paused. Can I call you tomorrow? Can I call? I looked at him. This grown man who had once been my baby, now standing in the wreckage of a lie he had loved because it hurt less than responsibility. Yes, I said. You can call. Hope flickered in his face. But I may not answer right away. He nodded. I understand. And I believed that maybe for the first time he truly did. As I left the house, Ethan ran after me and handed me the telescope instruction booklet. I still need help setting it up, he said. I smiled through tears. Then we'll find a night with clear skies. Behind him, Michael stood in the doorway silent and ashamed. This time I did not turn back to rescue him from that shame. Some pain is not punishment. Some pain is the beginning of becoming honest. Michael did call the next day. I did not answer. I sat in my kitchen while the phone rang on the table, his name glowing on the screen like something fragile. My hand hovered over it twice. Both times I pulled away. Not because I wanted to punish him, because for the first time in my life, I understood that loving my son did not require me to answer every call while my own heart was still bleeding. He left a voicemail. Mom, it's me. I know you may not want to talk. I understand. I just wanted to say, I'm not signing anything. Richard is helping me contact the bank and review the papers. I'm going to your counseling. I called this morning. Mom, it's me. I know you may not want to talk. I understand. I just wanted to say, I'm not signing anything. Richard is helping me contact the bank and review the papers. I'm going to counseling. I called this morning. I am sorry. I'll keep saying it, but I know saying it isn't enough. I love you. I listened to the message 3 times. Then I saved it. Not because it fixed everything, because it was the first message from Michael in years that did not ask, accuse, or defend. It simply stood there, humble and unfinished. The weeks after the truth came out were strange and quiet. Victor disappeared from Michael's life as quickly as he had entered it. Richard sent a formal letter warning Victor and his company not to contact Michael or me directly. Linda helped Michael gather the documents needed to withdraw from the redevelopment agreement before anything was fully executed. There were fees, threats, and one ugly voicemail from Victor's office, but Richard handled it with the calm of a man who had been waiting 20 years to write that letter. Michael did not get a miracle. That mattered. In stories, people often want the truth to arrive like lightning and fix everything it touches. But real truth is more like surgery. It opens what has been infected. It removes what should not stay. And afterward, there is pain, stitching, swelling, and a long season of careful healing. Michael lost the project. He lost whatever pride he had built around Victor's promises. He almost lost his marriage. Emily did not change overnight. For a while, she acted as if the truth had happened to her rather than through her. She cried to Michael about embarrassment, about being judged, about how everyone would think she was cruel. Michael listened, but he no longer let her make herself the center of every wound. One evening, about a month later, he told me over the phone, "We're seeing a counselor together." "How do you feel about that?" I asked. "Tired," he said, "but clear." That was the word he used often during those months. Clear. Not happy. Not healed. Not forgiven. Clear. He also began individual counseling. The first time he told me, he sounded ashamed. "I should have done this years ago," he said. "Maybe." There was a pause. "You don't soften things much anymore." "No," I said. "I spent too many years softening things until the truth had no shape left." He was quiet. Then he said, "I'm learning that." Michael took a job with a reputable construction company on the south side of Columbus. Not as an owner, not as a partner, not as a visionary, just as a project supervisor under a man named Alan Reeves, who had been building homes for 30 years and had no patience for charm without paperwork. The old Michael would have considered that beneath him. The new Michael called it a beginning. He makes me document everything Michael told me one Sunday afternoon. Change orders, receipts, permits, client approvals. Everything. Good. He laughed softly. You would like him. He makes me document everything, Michael told me one Sunday afternoon. Change orders, receipts, permits, client approvals. Everything. Good. He laughed softly. You would like him. I already do. He said talent without discipline is just a future lawsuit. I smiled despite myself. Alan sounds wise. He also told me not to use my mother's house as a business plan. The line went quiet after that. Then Michael said, I deserve that. Yes, I said gently. You did. He began paying me back too. At first I refused. Michael, that money is gone. No, he said. Some of it is still living in me. I need to honor that. I did not let him bankrupt himself with guilt. Richard helped us create a small monthly payment plan, not because I needed the money to survive, but because Michael needed a tangible way to practice responsibility. The first check he mailed me was for $75. I held it in my hand for a long time. Then I deposited it, not as repayment, as evidence. Emily came to my house for the first time 3 months after that night. She stood on my porch holding a pan of lemon bars wrapped in foil. Her eyes were red and she looked younger without the armor of perfect makeup and polished confidence. Samantha? She said, I owe you an apology. I stood in the doorway. Yes, you do. She flinched, but she did not leave. I was wrong about you. I pushed Michael's anger because it served what I wanted. I thought if he blamed you, then we had someone to push against together. I didn't understand what I was teaching Ethan. That was the part that mattered most to me. And now, I asked. She looked down. Now I'm ashamed? Shame can become useful if you let it make you honest. She nodded. I'd like to try. I let her in. Not all the way into my heart. Not yet, but into the house. That was enough for one afternoon. Ethan came back into my life more fully than anyone else. Every Friday evening, Michael dropped him off for what Ethan called star nights. We set up the telescope in my backyard, wrapped ourselves in quilts, and searched the sky for planets and constellations. The first clear night, Ethan looked through the lens and gasped. Nana, it's really there. What is the moon? I mean, I know it's there, but it looks different when you see it close. I looked at his small face, lit by moonlight. Yes, I said, some things do. He leaned against me. Dad cries sometimes. I know. He says crying is okay now. That's good. He says you saved him. My throat tightened. I tried. Ethan looked up at me. He says he didn't deserve it. I brushed a curl from his forehead. Children don't have to deserve protection, but adults have to deserve trust. He seemed to think about that. Is Dad deserving trust now? I looked toward the house where warm light glowed through the kitchen window. He is practicing. That became the truth of our family. We practiced. Michael practiced calling without needing anything. I practiced answering when I was ready, not when guilt pulled at me. Emily practiced humility. Ethan practiced being a child again, in a family where adults were finally trying to tell the truth. 6 months after the dinner where everything broke open, Michael invited me over again. This time there was no Victor, no paperwork, no hidden request. Just pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, and Ethan setting the table with serious concentration. Emily hugged me at the door a little awkwardly but sincerely. Michael stood in the kitchen wearing an apron dusted with flour because he had tried to make biscuits from scratch. They may be terrible, he said. I've eaten hospital cafeteria biscuits, I told him. I'll survive. For the first time in years, he laughed like my son. After dinner, Ethan went to find a board game, and Emily stepped outside to take a call from her mother. Michael and I were alone at the dining table, a quieter table than the one that had held all those documents. He looked at me. I used to think if I admitted Dad was wrong, I'd lose him. I folded my hands around my coffee mug, and now I think I lost myself trying to protect who I needed him to be. I said nothing. He continued, I don't hate him. That surprised me. It's hard to stop loving someone just because the truth arrives. He nodded. But I see him differently. That is not betrayal, Michael. That is adulthood. His eyes filled. And you? Do you see me differently? I looked at my son, the lines around his eyes, the humility that had replaced some of the old defensiveness, the shame still teaching him the love still reaching clumsily toward repair. Yes, I said. Pain crossed his face. I see you more clearly now, I added. Not as the boy I had to protect from every consequence. Not as the man who hurt me beyond words. I see both. And I am waiting to see who you choose to become next. He wiped his eyes. I want to become someone you don't have to survive. That was when I reached across the table and took his hand. Not because everything was healed, because healing had finally become honest. Michael bowed his head. I'm sorry, Mom. This time I squeezed his hand. I know. And for the first time in 20 years, those 2 words did not feel like surrender. They felt like a door opening. Life has taught me that the person who gets blamed the loudest is not always the person who caused the pain. Sometimes, the one standing quietly in the background, the one who says little pays, quietly cries privately, and keeps showing up, is the one who has been holding the whole family together. But love should never require a person to disappear. Samantha protected Michael because he was her son. But in the end, protection without truth became its own kind of prison. Michael could not grow while blaming his mother for every failure. Samantha could not heal while carrying a lie to preserve the image of a man who had hurt them both. And their family could not become whole until the truth was finally allowed to stand in the room. The greatest lesson is this: responsibility is where healing begins. We do not become free by finding someone to blame. We become free when we are brave enough to ask, what part of this belongs to me? Michael's life changed not because his mother saved him again with money, but because the truth forced him to stop running from himself. If this story touched your heart, please tell me in the comments. Have you ever been misunderstood by someone you loved, or have you ever protected someone who never knew the cost? I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. If you believe stories like this matter, please like this video, subscribe, and stay with us for more emotional family stories about truth, justice, and healing.